Hello everyone and welcome to this Advent calendar. This is a re-release. The reason for that is that before chapter 18 to 20 had some weird crackling in it and I'm not really sure why that was. So I re-recorded them and now we have a crackling free Advent calendar that I hope you can enjoy even more. Thank you so much to listeners who pointed this out to me. That helped tremendously. I actually didn't notice it when I cut it. So thank you very much and I hope you enjoy. Hello everyone and welcome to our English Advent calendar that is happening on this channel. And this year we are reading a Drarry fanfiction. The story is by Jolly Love. Thank you very much for letting me use it. And the name of the story is A Husband for Christmas. As always, everything is linked in the description. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss anything that's going on this channel in this wonderful month of December. And I really hope you'll enjoy this little story. Summary. Draco Malfoy is a single father after his wife dies due to an unknown illness. It has been 4 years and the ministry urges him to find another wife of good status so the Malfoy family won't lose the manor. However, time is short and Draco realizes that he can't be everywhere at once. Enter Pansy Parkinson, who refers him to a very good childcare expert. Without questioning, Draco hires the man, not knowing who he is or how his story will end. Door 1. Christmas time is here. Draco sighed as he hurried through the still dark corridors of Malfoy Manor. They hadn't even officially started and he was already in a tricky situation. The letter from the ministry had appeared out of nowhere and given him an ultimatum. He could either be homeless with his son or marry someone by Christmas and keep the manor and his reputation. While the portrait growled at him for making noise so early in the morning, Draco couldn't think of keeping it down. His ancestors were the one to put him in this situation. If they hadn't chosen to stay on the bad side of war, he wouldn't have to be forced to marry again. Not that there weren't people interested. His business was booming and a lot of men were just looking for something stable and also to claim that they brought him back from the dark side. As Draco entered his study, he glanced at the only portrait that meant something to him, his late wife, Astoria Malfoy. She was the one who could have bragged with bringing him back to a somewhat normal life. Not that she would have bragged about it, but she still could have. He smiled softly and sat down by his desk, staring at the letter that had kept him up all through the early mornings. He could have just decided to stay unmarried, but he needed to do something for his son. Growing up on the streets was not something he wanted Scorpius to go through. Neither was having a father who only thought about his job. Sadly, he couldn't change the letter. He needed to stay on top of everything. Sighing, Draco grabbed the quill and decided to ask for help. He needed someone to look after his son, even if everyone who tried ended up leaving. Maybe his best friend, Pansy Parkinson, had a good idea.
"Draco, darling, you look dreadful. What happened to you?"
Pansy greeted him when she sat down in the French restaurant they were meeting at. Smiling weakly, he looked at her closely. She looked so happy and full of life that he couldn't refrain from being a little jealous. She seemed to be living the life he had wanted for himself. Nevertheless, he needed to get her help.
"I'm feeling terrible, thank you,"
he sighed.
"The ministry sent a letter. I need to either marry someone with a white vest again, or I'm being evicted."
Pansy frowned.
"They can't do that to you, though, can they?" "You know what I am, Pansy."
He didn't like to call himself a Death Eater. Not in public, anyways. Other people already were telling him what he was anyways.
"They can absolutely do that."
"So, when do you need to find someone? And when is the wedding?" The waiter came and took their orders. Draco didn't even have to open the menu to know what was being made here. It was his favorite restaurant, and whenever he needed to feel better, or he wanted to do something nice for himself, he would come here. Once the waiter left again, he finally answered the question.
"Christmas Eve.
Pansy frowned. Now? In like 24 days? Her wide eyes almost made Draco laugh. If his situation hadn't been so dire, he would have definitely laughed about this reaction. But not now that it was his own life that he had to throw away.
Yes.
They were silent, both lost in their own thoughts until the food came. Draco looked down at his beautifully cooked flamiche and felt no hunger at all. He instead took another sip of wine and turned to Pansy again. His best friend was in deep thoughts before she suddenly turned to him. What are you planning then? I doubt you want to lose the manor.
Well,
Draco chuckled humorously.
I wouldn't really mind losing the manor. I just don't want Scorpius to grow up without a home.
He looked at his food again, taking the fork, and ate a small piece.
As for the marriage, I'll have to go and find a matchmaker. I don't have time for anything else.
These are expensive and time-consuming, Draco. What about Scorpius? Pansy asked before she started eating as well. Draco sighed again. There was no other way.
I might to hire a caregiver again, but with Scorpius' track record, I might need to look for someone every other day.
Pansy smiled weakly. Yes, Scorpius was a sweet child, but he liked to scare everyone he didn't like into oblivion, and if they weren't careful, destroy their lives. If you're interested, I've got my 2 children in the hands of a really good caregiver whenever I don't have time. I could ask him if he'd like to earn more during Christmas time. Frowning, Draco looked up from his food.
And he's good.
Only the best for me, Draco. You know that. Pansy chuckled. I'll tell you what. When I'm home, I'll send a letter to go and meet you and Scorpius tomorrow morning. Make it a trial day. If he doesn't work well with Scorpius, I'll pay for the day. Draco raised his eyebrows.
Pansy usually didn't throw money around. Are you so sure he'll do fine with Scorp?
Grinning, his best friend nodded. 100%. Sighing, Draco finally relented.
Fine. Make it 7 in the morning.
To be continued. So, my dear friends, this was the first door of our Advent calendar for this year's Christmas season, and I really hope you enjoyed it. This story will update every day until the 24th, so German Christmas, basically. And from then onwards, we'll go back to normal fanfiction stories that are not Christmas-related. I really hope you're looking forward to it. I am. And I really hope you stick along for the ride. Thank you for listening. Hello everyone and welcome to day 2 of the Drarry Advent calendar for this year. The story is by Jolly Love and is named A Husband for Christmas. Chapter 2. Grandma got run over by a reindeer. Draco had half expected a caregiver not to arrive at 7 o'clock in the morning. When the walls shifted slightly and the doorbell sounded a few seconds later, Draco had to admit that he was happy this man had been able to come. Today was also the day where he had asked the matchmaker to arrive, and it was probably fine for a test run. But Pansy still needed to pay, he was sure. Opening the door, Draco widened his eyes in surprise when he found someone fairly familiar standing there.
Potter?
Smiling weakly, his childhood nemesis inclined his head slightly.
Lord Malfoy, I believe I've been asked for a trial day taking care of your son.
He checked his watch and smirked.
And I haven't even been late, so why the surprise?
Unable to say anything, Draco stepped back. Potter had learned quite the manners, and it was almost fascinating watching him enter the house. He looked like a completely different person. First and foremost, he was finally wearing clothes that fit him far too well, and the new glasses he was wearing finally matched his face shape. In the end, he only found his voice again when Potter turned to him with a faint smirk on his face.
It appears as though Pansy never told me the name of the person who takes care of her children.
Potter nodded.
Well, nobody does. It's in my contract. That nobody's allowed to talk about you?
Draco frowned, unsure of what he should do with that information. What was that supposed to mean?
Yes, just imagine what people would do to get me to be their children's caregiver. I don't want to be that person anymore. I want to help children whose parents are a little busy so they don't have to feel alone.
Potter stood there so proud and almost happy that Draco had to admit. He liked this side of him. Nodding, he motioned Potter to follow him into the parlor. It was one of smaller ones, and his father had usually used it as a business meeting room. It had one table in the middle and 4 chairs around it. That was all that fit in there, apart from a little decorations which Astoria had done and Draco never even dared taking down. They sat down on opposite ends, and Potter seemed open and interested in what Draco was going to tell him. He already liked it. None of the other childcare experts had shown any interest in what he was going to tell them.
Today is a trial day, as you've already said. I will be here in the house having a meeting.
Draco started and watched Potter as he took out a thin booklet and a muggle pen.
I was thinking of half a day, and if it works out between the two of you, maybe extend this trial phase for the whole day.
Potter smiled.
Agreed. Where is the meeting taking place?
When Draco hesitated, he flashed him a bigger smile.
Just as a precaution, Lord Malfoy. In case it gets louder and I don't intend on disturbing your meeting.
He really had gotten impeccable manners. Draco needed almost a full second to get back on track.
West Parlor? Just don't go anywhere near the west side of the manor.
There were so many pictures and memories of Astoria. He didn't want Potter nor Scorpius to see them. Writing something, Potter nodded. Then the door was ripped open and Scorpius appeared. He frowned at Potter and Draco saw a minuscule rolling of his eyes. He probably already knew that this man was another caregiver and most likely tried to figure out a way to get rid of him.
Father, I want to go sledding. You promised we'd do it today.
He had the same eyes Astoria had had. It was almost impossible to say no. The problem was that today Draco had to say no, and he was not looking forward to tell Potter to go sledding with his son. None of the caregivers had gotten through sledding with Scorpius.
I'm sorry, Scorp. I've got an important meeting which will take place for the better part of the day.
What about him, then?
Scorpius asked and turned to face Potter.
You're my new caretaker, aren't you?
He sounded so arrogant right now. If Potter hadn't been there, Draco would have definitely told his son to show strangers some more respect.
Potter chuckled. I'm a caregiver, yes. Only for today, though. Until we can go sledding.
Draco widened his eyes and turned to Potter, about to discourage him from doing that, when his childhood nemesis smiled at him.
Don't worry, we'll be fine. You go to your meeting. We'll go sledding.
There was a mischievous glint in Scorpius' eyes, and all Draco could do was sigh. If Potter really wanted to deal with an out-of-control Scorpius on the first day, not even on the trial day, of the job, fine by him. He could also just start looking for a new caregiver after the meeting with the matchmaker.
Well then, Scorp, go get ready,
was the only thing Draco could say. To be continued. Hello everyone and welcome back to our 3rd day of our Drarry Advent Calendar by Jolly Love named A Husband for Christmas. Chapter 3. Dashing Through the Snow. Harry wasn't really surprised to see the smaller Malfoy with the same kind of arrogance he had seen on Malfoy Sr. Well, Draco to be exact. There was a rumor that Scorpius Malfoy was the worst child of them all. He had seen countless good caregivers visit the Malfoy house only to be scared away by his antics. It had always amused him how easy it was for him to mess with each and every one. He was sure by the look on Malfoy's face that sledding was something Scorpius used to scare them all even more. But he really wanted to find out why this young man was so against everyone. And so, after 30 minutes, the two of them had left Malfoy Manor behind them and walked towards a favorite Muggle sledding hill. It was a little scary, how much of an exact copy little Scorpius Malfoy was to Draco Malfoy. It reminded him so much of the first time he had seen Malfoy in the shop there in Diagon Alley.
I want to go downhill really fast and hit a tree,
Scorpius said and grinned, looking at Harry expectantly. Was this how he wanted to scare him? Was this how the others were constantly scared of him?
Okay,
Harry answered and pointed towards a few smaller trees.
If you hit these, you could maybe even break them. We could bring the elves a little firewood.
Scorpius frowned.
I want to hit the biggest tree.
Harry looked over to the one which was wrapped with a few layers of straw.
Okay, I'll tell you what. If you hit the biggest tree within 3 tries, we'll go and get ice cream somewhere.
It was funny to see how Scorpius was visibly confused, though the promise of ice cream got him rather interested.
It's winter. There's no ice cream parlor open.
Well, if you miss 3 times, I don't have to show you where my secret ice cream shop is then, do I?
Harry smirked when Scorpius grabbed his sled and sped up the hill, clearly paying attention. Harry walked over to the tree, not standing close there, but close enough to see Scorpius actually trying to angle his sled so he would hit the tree. The first time he almost hit Harry, who jumped out of the way laughing.
Do I look like a tree to you?
He asked when Scorpius was next to him again. The Malfoy grinned.
Yes.
Harry chuckled.
Well, if you hit me, we're both going to St. Mango's and you're going to stay there until I'm feeling better.
Scorpius looked at him incredibly hurt. Harry smirked and continued.
But if you hit the tree, we'll get ice cream. Do you really want to wait to find out where my secret ice cream shop is?
Does it even exist?
Scorpius asked rather suspiciously.
Yes, I swear on my magic. I'm not tricking you with the ice cream shop.
The Malfoy frowned.
You know, Father says you should never ever swear on your magic. It shows you can't trust someone.
Harry nodded.
I've been brought up with muggles. I don't know wizard culture that well.
Is the ice cream shop also muggle?
Scorpius asked with wide eyes.
I won't tell. You have to hit the tree if you want to find out more about the ice cream shop.
Rolling his eyes, Scorpius grabbed his sled and sped back up the hill. This time he really seemed to try and hit the tree, though he rushed by only inches away from it. Harry chuckled when the little Malfoy glanced at the tree and the top of the hill, as if he wanted to calculate the best way to hit it.
Hey, if I hit the tree, do I get 3 scoops of ice cream?
He asked hopeful. Harry smirked.
If you hit the tree, you can get whatever you want, but only if you hit the tree.
Scorpius nodded.
This time I can do it.
I would hope so. I was really looking forward to some ice cream.
Harry grinned and Scorpius threw him a dark glare before he ran back up the hill. He watched as the child carefully placed the sled, even angled it with his hands outstretched. He really seemed to want some ice cream, even though it was in the middle of winter. When he finally sat on his sled, he narrowed his eyes and scooted closer to the edge. Just then a woman walked closer to Harry and frowned at him disapprovingly.
Is that your child up there?
She asked with quirked eyebrows.
No, ma'am. I'm a nanny.
He grinned over the dumbfounded looks and turned back to look at Scorpius, who just let go and seemed to actually go straight towards the tree. The woman screamed at him for being unprofessional and ran towards the child, only for Scorpius to get out of her way in the last second and lose sight of the tree. Harry rolled his eyes and without being seen quickly performed a little magic so the sled was back on track and within seconds hit the tree. Scorpius flew into the air, having hit the tree sideways and landed in the soft snow, laughing loudly.
I hit it! I did you see? I hit the tree!
He got up, still laughing, and brushed the snow from his clothes. Smirking, Harry walked closer as well and got the sled.
Guess we can have some ice cream then.
Scorpius laughed and nodded with wide eyes.
I thought I almost missed the tree, but in the end, I got it. I'm the best.
To be continued. Welcome back, everyone, to our Advent Calendar Drarry story of this year, which is called A Husband for Christmas and is by Jolly Love. Day 3. Do you hear what I hear? When Harry opened the door to the ice cream parlor, there weren't many people sitting inside. It wasn't much warmer than it was on the outside, but the Christmassy music made everything worth it. Placing the sled by the door, Harry walked up to the counter and rang the bell twice. The person walking in from the back widened his eyes and grinned broadly.
"Oh, I cannot believe it, Harry."
Laughing, Harry hugged Ron, who stormed out behind the counter and introduced him to Scorpius.
"This is Scorpius Malfoy. I'm taking care of him for today."
He then turned to the little blonde-haired boy.
"And this is Ronald Weasley, my best friend since childhood."
You fought in the war.
Scorpius sat with wide eyes.
Father told me all about it. You were awesome.
"Thank you, young man."
Ron grinned.
"For this compliment, you'll get anything you wish for free."
Harry smirked.
"How can you make business if you give every customer free ice cream, Ron?"
His best friend shrugged.
"Enough people are interested in giving tips. Take a seat."
He motioned to the tables.
"I'll be with you in a sec."
Scorpius chose a seat by the window and grinned as he looked outside. He seemed so happy, and when he wasn't showing off the little arrogance he had, he was a completely different boy. He was innocent, which children should be, in Harry's opinion. Being Draco Malfoy's child must have had a toll on him. People probably just assumed that he was an evil child, and as such he must have felt terrible. That was why he liked Slytherin children. He wanted to show them that the world wasn't as tough and hard as they thought it was. It could be fun as well. Ron walked up and smiled at them.
"Now then, what's your name again, little one?"
Scorpius, and I'm tall for my age.
Scorpius said, grinning.
Father says I'm probably going to be the tallest in my class.
Chuckling, Ron shrugged his shoulders.
"I wouldn't say so. My Rose is also rather tall. She's going to Hogwarts next year. How about you?"
That was apparently the thing that got Scorpius the most excited, since his eyes lit up like a Christmas tree.
I'm going in the summer. I cannot wait to see what it looks like.
"Like any other castle you've seen before?"
Harry smirked.
"I doubt it's much bigger than Malfoy Manor, right, Ron?"
Ron snorted.
"It's by 4 smaller than Malfoy Manor."
Scorpius glared at Harry.
I know you're messing with me.
Harry grinned.
"You know me for 1 day. How could you possibly know when I'm messing with you?"
The Malfoy heir threw a look at Ron, possibly for him to help out, but the Gryffindor only chuckled.
"Anything I can bring the two of you? Coffee, ice cream, the Christmas spirit?" "Christmas spirit, please."
Harry winked at Ron, who laughed and rolled his eyes. He then turned to Scorpius.
"What can I get you, young man? I have got everything."
Everything?
"Everything."
Ron confirmed and winked at Harry. Once again, Harry saw a mischievous glint in Scorpius' eyes. Before he could say something ridiculous, which he then was probably not going to eat, he leaned forward and said quietly,
"Get an ice cream brownie. It's the best thing ever."
Turning back to Ron, Scorpius grinned.
What's an ice cream brownie?
"Well,"
Ron chuckled.
"you take a brownie, you fill it with whatever ice cream you want, and you then douse it with caramel fudge sauce."
Harry could see the child's eyes getting wide, and he nodded, thrilled on trying something like that.
Can I get one of those with stracciatella ice cream?
Ron nodded and walked off. Scorpius grinned and looked at Harry carefully. After a few seconds, Harry smiled and wordlessly raised his eyebrows. Did he have a question, or was he just trying to annoy him again?
So, you're not looking after me just so you can get closer to Father?
Shaking his head, Harry thought of what this poor child had to go through to have such trust issues.
"I'm just here for you. Your father doesn't have much time on his hands right now, so I'm here for a little help."
Scorpius nodded and looked at the table.
He never really has time for me anyways.
Harry didn't know what to say. He sounded so sad and hopeless. Malfoy surely made time for his son, right? Maybe it just wasn't enough for Scorpius himself. I couldn't really believe that after what he went through with Lucius, that Malfoy would be such a father.
I'm sure he tries to have as much time for you as he can. It's Christmas time after all.
Harry smiled. Scorpius looked up and shook his head.
He needs to find someone to marry. Otherwise, we'll be on the streets by the end of the year. You won't have time to have fun with me.
Poor Malfoy. What had he gotten himself into again? Marrying someone by Christmas? That had to be an arranged marriage. Otherwise, he would have a girlfriend already, and they would be looking at how to plan the perfect wedding. Before the situation could get any more somber, Ron appeared with a brownie and another ice cream. Scorpius looked at it interested, though before he could turn to Ron and order such a nice white and red ice cream bar, Harry interrupted.
I don't think your father would appreciate it if I brought you home having tasted your first alcohol, Scorpius. It's red wine with vanilla.
He smirked while Scorpius laughed again.
I want one.
Then you can come here as soon as you're 18 and I'll serve you one,
Ron answered and grinned. To be continued. Hello everyone and welcome back to our Drarry Advent Calendar. We are reading the story A Husband for Christmas by Jolly Love. Day 5. Jesus Christ and the Apple Tree. Draco sat on his desk, having just sent another letter to Potter. At his first meeting with the potential husband coming up. 3 days after having talked with the matchmaker, he was not happy with how slowly all of this was going. It was already the 5th of December. In 20 days he should be married. It was all just going so slowly. When he walked through the hallway, he passed his son's room. Scorpius had clearly heard him and stood by the door within seconds.
Father, is Harry coming over today?
Couldn't get over his son calling Potter Harry. How well had these two actually gotten on? His son hadn't told him anything of what they had done together, but they both had come back with happy faces. He'd never seen a caregiver more at ease with his son. Then again, that wasn't hard to do. Turning to his son, Draco nodded.
Yes, he'll be here this afternoon. I will be gone for a few hours. I hope you understand.
Scorpius nodded.
Sure, Father. I know you only want what's the best for us.
With that, he was back in his room and closed the door behind his back. They both knew this wasn't the case. Draco was looking out for Scorpius, not himself. But even though both knew what Draco was doing, they also knew that there wasn't a way in getting Draco to stop. The happiness of his son was more important to him than his own happiness. And in a way, he had already gotten this happily ever after. It just wasn't forever. But nothing in this world was forever. Within a few hours, Draco had gotten himself looking good enough for a meeting. He brought his hair back and stared into the mirror. His mind showed him memories upon memories of Astoria, helping him getting ready for business meetings, ministry events, and everything else. A soft smile had strengthened him infinitely in the way she had always made sure his tie was straight and the jacket set nicely on his white shirt showed how much she cared for him. Scorpius would always come in as well and wanted to get dressed by her too, which she then did with the same careful eye she had helped Draco. How much he missed her right now. Surely she would have known what to do instead of going on dates set up by a matchmaker. He straightened his tie and stopped in the middle, unable to finish all of this without falling apart. Luckily, he was saved by the doorbell ringing and heard Scorpius run through the manor, even though the elves had probably already opened the door. He inhaled deeply and stood straight, brushing some tears out of his face. He needed to be open for this meeting or date or whatever else the matchmaker had called it. He needed someone to marry him by Christmas, or he would lose his manor, his home. Walking down the stairs to the entrance, he found Scorpius almost dancing around Harry, who laughed and smiled weakly. Wait, had he just called Potter Harry? Draco sighed. His son was rubbing off on him, and he didn't like it. Well, maybe he liked it a little. Right now, Harry grabbed his son around the shoulders, effectively stopping him from dancing around anymore.
We're staying in the house, Scorpius, so you need to think of something else to do.
But I want to get a Christmas tree,
he whined.
Please, we hadn't had one for 4 years.
Draco froze on the stairs. Christmas had never really been the same after Astoria died. He had always been the one to decorate a tree, and when she died, Draco couldn't bring himself to get a tree. He hadn't thought of his son. Harry chuckled and shook his head.
It's far too early to get a Christmas tree, Scorpius.
Today is the 5th of December. We need a tree today.
I'll tell you a secret. The best Christmas tree is the one you get on the 23rd of December. Otherwise, they'll die too fast.
Harry shrugged his shoulders and grinned.
Oh, Wizards! Come on, we can get a tree, please! Please, 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 please!
Scorpius was begging so much he was practically on his knees already. Harry seemed unfazed, whereas he would have told Scorpius, "Fine, let's go." Apparently, Potter was a better caregiver than he had thought. He placed his winter jacket in a chair and turned back to Draco's son.
I actually thought we could make some cookies today.
Harry offered and smiled. Scorpius frowned.
The house elves do that.
Harry chuckled.
Oh, I've never tasted cookies made by magic that were better than cookies made without. Nothing can top my cookies.
He grinned and winked at Scorpius.
Nothing.
All right, fine, we'll make cookies. But I already have my favorite cookie kind, and it won't change. Nothing can change it.
Draco saw a glint in his eyes, and he mimicked Harry.
Nothing.
And with that, he ran down the hall towards the kitchen. Draco shook his head and walked down the stairs, smirking softly.
Thank you for coming on such a short notice.
Harry smiled and inclined his head again.
Of course, Lord Malfoy. I didn't have anything planned for today anyway.
When Draco wanted to walk past Harry to finally get the stupid meeting over, the Gryffindor held him back.
1 second, please. What?
Before he could ask why the men held him back, Potter grabbed his tie and straightened it quickly. Draco froze and looked at the man in front of him in utter disbelief. Potter smiled as he also straightened his jacket.
You shouldn't go to a meeting without looking apart, Lord Malfoy. Please excuse my interruptions.
With another inclination of the head, the Gryffindor walked down the hallway to where Scorpius had disappeared and left Draco with visible confusion and a memory on his mind. To be continued. Hello everyone and welcome back to our Drarry Advent Calendar with the story A Husband for Christmas by Jolly Laugh. Today we're already at day 6. Little Saint Nick.
Well, that was a disaster,
Draco mumbled when he opened the door to the manor. He hadn't really had big expectations. You couldn't have those when you were looking for someone with a matchmaker, but for Merlin's sake, this man had been a total idiot. Not only had he appeared almost half an hour late, he had then also decided to tell him that he was only meeting him because his mother made him do so. That was their first interaction. How was that the first thing he had heard from this man's mouth? He hadn't even excused himself for being late, no. He just started a rant that lasted through half of their dinner, only for him to run off before the bill arrived. If that was the first one, at least everybody else was an improvement. As he entered the living room, he saw Harry entering from the other side alone, looking around as he was searching for something. Draco stopped and frowned at Harry, who carefully checked the room only to turn back to the huge closet. He snuck closer and opened it so quickly that Draco heard Scorpius squeal loudly by surprise. Draco bit his lower lip so he wouldn't start laughing from watching the scene.
No!
Scorpius called out when Harry laughed.
I don't understand how you can do that. It's my house, yet you keep finding me. How do you do that?
I'm an amazing caregiver,
Harry called out and made what Draco assumed was a superhero pose. Scorpius laughed and shook his head while Harry helped him out of the closet.
In all honesty, as a former Auror, I know where people go to hide. If I were to hide from you, you'd never find me.
That's what you think.
Scorpius grinned. He seemed to suddenly find Draco standing in the room.
Father, you're home.
Draco sighed.
I am.
Harry turned around and smiled.
Lord Malfoy, with this I will.
Why are you so formal towards father?
Scorpius asked and stepped in front of Harry. Draco had always found Scorpius' lack of behavior funny, but not now. All he wanted now was a quiet evening to get over his failure of a date. Nevertheless, he did want to know more about Harry's manners, and having seen him being around Scorpius, who seemed to be very close to Harry, he was a little confused by the formality Potter was showing him. Smiling, Harry looked at Scorpius.
Well, I've found that being formal and showing manners usually shows off the respect I have for people.
So you don't respect me?
Scorpius asked, poking an eyebrow. Harry stopped and frowned at Draco's son before inclining his head.
With all due respect, Herr Malfoy, I've not intended on showing you less manners than I am currently showing your father, Lord Malfoy. If you would please accept my deepest apology and...
Scorpius started laughing and fell on the floor, holding his stomach. Harry, meanwhile, was having a hard time not laughing as well, seeing as though the pureblood rules did not allow for laughter, giggling or smirking in the presence of a higher status, unless they were doing any of these as well.
He's not stupid. I want my Harry Potter back,
Scorpius finally said when he lay on the floor, done from all his laughter. Finally smirking, Harry held out a hand and nodded.
Fine.
He then turned to Draco.
As I was going to say, if you have any other upcoming meetings, Lord Malfoy, please do not hesitate to contact me. I will be here looking after your son.
When Harry walked by Draco, he turned as well.
Thank you, Lord Potter.
Both men turned to each other again, and with a smile, Harry left. Scorpius walked towards Draco and frowned.
So, how was your date?
Great.
Draco smiled, realizing quickly that he didn't want to scare his son.
I'll have some more dates with him, and we'll see if it works out.
You do know that working out in this case means marrying him, right?
Scorpius asked and frowned. Nodding, Draco hugged his son, trying his hardest to keep the happy facade up.
Of course, son. Once it gets more serious, I will also introduce him to you.
Scorpius didn't say anything. Simply looked at him as if he could read every thought. Astoria had been able to do that, and he didn't doubt that Scorpius inherited this talent from her. However, he seemed to keep the peace, as he simply nodded and turned towards the stairs.
Good night, Father. I'm glad your date went well.
Draco sighed, falling onto the sofa and rubbed his forehead. An elf appeared, wordlessly leaving some whiskey, and Draco downed it quickly. Was he really doing all that he could for his family? Was his decision fair towards Scorpius? Yes, he needed someone else in his life, someone who held his son as high as he did. But who would even want that? He knew that most wizards just thought of Draco as a trophy. His son was in the way, no matter who you asked. They were probably all happy that Scorpius was going to Hogwarts next year. Getting up, Draco walked through the hallways to the West Manor. It wasn't fair to Scorpius just to marry someone who didn't want him. Then again, if Draco didn't marry, they could lose everything, so he needed to marry. As he approached one specific portrait, he found Astoria missing from it. He reached out and slowly let his fingers run over the golden ornaments, wondering if she would come see him, if he would call out to her.
Astoria, he whispered softly. Astoria, I don't know what to do without you.
The portrait remained empty. To be continued. Hello and welcome back everyone to our Drarry Advent Calendar with the lovely story A Husband for Christmas by Jolly Love. Today we are starting with Day 7, Sleigh Ride. Harry rushed through Diagon Alley and quickly jumped into Weasley's Wizard's Wheezers.
"Morning, George,"
he called through the still empty shop. A sleepy redhead walked out from the back and yawned, which made Harry laugh.
"What happened to you, mate? A long night?" "Mirror won't sleep, and Fred is so annoyed with his little sister."
Harry smirked.
"Does it remind you of you and Ginny?"
This question made George snort.
"Every second."
He sighed.
"So, what can I do for you, my favorite customer?" "Well, I want to give away another Hogwarts starter kit for someone."
George's eyes lit up and he smirked.
"Oh, I will do anything I can for this starter kit. Who should get it?"
Harry smiled.
"Someone special."
Nodding, George grabbed a piece of paper and pen and gave it to Harry.
"You know how we do it,"
he grinned.
"Make a cross for all the special editions." "Well, you know I want them all."
He laughed. He quickly crossed all the editions and handed the paper back.
"When can I come and get it?"
George turned to the calendar and frowned.
"We do have a lot of orders this Christmas, but I will make sure that yours will finish as soon as possible. Let's make it the 20th as the latest. Does that work for you?"
Nodding, Harry bid goodbye and left the shop. He walked through a few side alleys before he found Neville's flower shop.
"Morning, Neville."
The other man was working behind the desk and looked up when he saw Harry enter. Despite the fact that 7th year had really messed with him, he had gotten so much more healthy, probably also thanks to his wife Hannah. Before he could say anything, someone else had heard Harry enter the shop.
"Uncle Harry!"
3 children called out and ran towards Harry. He caught them all and hugged them quickly.
"You have grown so fast. How's that possible? Haven't I seen you only 10 days ago?"
Harry asked and grinned at them. Jamie nodded proudly.
"I'm almost ready for Hogwarts."
Harry smirked.
"Do you need to be a specific amount of height to sort, or?"
"No,"
Jamie laughed.
"but I'm so tall because I'm almost 10.
Neville had a smirk on his face when he brought Harry 6 lilies and a black rose. No matter what these flowers meant, he had loved them. On the first proper date after the war he'd had with Ginny, he had wanted to spell the rose an even brighter red and ended up turning it black. They had both laughed so much about this that every rose afterwards had been a black one.
"They're the freshest flowers I could find, Harry."
Neville smiled.
"Tell them I said hi, will you?"
Nodding, Harry hugged Neville and gave him a few galleons, even if he tried not to accept. He always ended up leaving it for the children to find around the greenhouse, and they brought it to Hannah. Not that Neville didn't know about it. It was their little tradition. And with all of that finished, Harry walked a short distance from the happy, awakening Diagon Alley to the closed cemetery. It was too early for anybody to be there anyway. We enjoyed the silence of the dead. Entering the cemetery was like the first time he had entered Diagon Alley. It was a magical place. Every grave had other conditions, usually to what the dead had wanted. Some wanted eternal snow, others enjoyed wind and colored leaves on the floor. Ginny's grave was at the back, hidden by a large rock from the public sight. Over her grave flew the first snitch she had ever caught, and which had established her as the best seeker Britain had ever had. After Harry had stopped playing, that was. At least that was what they had always joked about. He knelt down and placed the flowers on her grave, staring at the lettering. Ginevra Molly Weasley Potter, beloved daughter, sister, and wife. Underneath was another inscription, much smaller but still readable. James Harrison Potter, beloved son.
"Hey, guys,"
Harry said quietly as he felt a small tear trail down his cheek.
"I've brought some flowers. You like them, Ginny? Neville gave them to me. You always loved his flowers."
He trailed his fingers over the inscription of his son.
"And I like to think that you would have liked them too,"
he whispered as more tears came down. Christmas was always a hard time for him. Everyone was happy, and he went to see his wife and unborn child. Nothing could have saved them. and with one foul in a vicious Quidditch match, he had lost his entire world. And so he sat there, hidden from the world, talking to his wife and son. It happened so long ago, but it never got easier. To be continued. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our Drarry Advent Calendar of this year with the story A Husband for Christmas by Jolly Love. Today we're at day 8, Santa Baby. The third time Harry walked into Malfoy Manor, Draco had keyed him into the wards. So now, as soon as he had walked towards the door, they had opened automatically. Unsure of what to do, Harry had stood there alone in the great hall until he called out for
Lord Malfoy.
Even though he had technically called for Draco, Scorpius had been the first to greet him.
Harry!
He called from the stairs and basically jumped over the banister right into Harry's arms. He had absolutely not seen that coming, and they ended up both falling to the floor, with Scorpius being white as a ghost over what just happened, and Harry laughing loudly. And soon after, Lord Malfoy appeared as well, and saw the scene on the floor. Harry was able to detect a small smirk on his lips before he got up.
I'm sorry, Lord Malfoy. I wasn't aware I'd been keyed into the wards.
That had never happened, not even with Pansy, and not even after he had looked after her 2 children for the past 5 years. Draco smiled and inclined his head.
Next time you can call for Lolu. She'll bring you to me.
Harry nodded once, while Scorpius was running back up the stairs to get his winter clothes so they could go out again. Harry looked at Draco closer. He was absolutely stunning in his royal blue suit and white shirt.
No tie?
Harry asked and couldn't keep himself from smirking. Draco seemingly always had problems getting his tie straight, even though all of them had to wear ties for all of their Hogwarts years. Draco shook his head and sighed.
I'm not used to them anymore. Does this outfit really need a tie?
Yes.
Not necessarily, Lord Malfoy.
Harry smiled.
However, if I do recall correctly, it is pure-blood behavior to show up to a matchmaker meeting with a tie.
Harry wondered why Draco was so adamant against ties. He seemed to have a real problem with them. The Slytherin disappeared only to show up with a matching tie around his neck a few seconds later. There was also a suspicious amount of water around his eyes.
Would you like me to assist you, Lord Malfoy?
Harry asked quietly, seeing as Draco was struggling with it.
Please,
he whispered. Quietly, Harry finished the started tie and straightened it without words. He could see Draco struggling really hard under his hands. He also quickly straightened the jacket and folded the shirt over the tie around his neck. By now, Draco had closed his eyes, clearly concentrated on his breathing. Harry stepped back and watched his employer.
I'm sorry.
Opening his eyes, Draco frowned, looked down at his tie, and then up at Harry again.
What for? For your loss. I know it's not easy, and some things hurt more than others. Are you telling me to move on, like the rest of the world does?
Draco glared at him. Harry shook his head.
No. Everyone's different. Some people feel quicker.
He swallowed hard, tried to hold back his own tears.
Others don't. Some are never the same.
Before Draco could respond to that, Scorpius rushed down the stairs.
Got it, I'm ready. Can we go to the zoo and see which animals are still awake?
Smiling, Harry got himself out of the terrifying mindset and he nodded.
Oh, of course, Scorpius. If we're lucky, we can even see the penguins walk around.
Scorpius' eyes grew wide and he nodded enthusiastically.
Yes, I want to see the penguins walk through the zoo.
If we're back before you, Lord Malfoy,
Harry turned formal again.
I will wait here with Scorpius.
He inclined his head when Scorpius suddenly grabbed his arm and tore him out of the manor.
Let's go, Harry.
Walking through the zoo with Scorpius was extremely funny. Not only were there not many people inside since the weather wasn't the best, but Scorpius' comments to every animal were the best. In the end, he seemed to love the zebras the most and even wanted to ride one. Harry had told him that that wasn't an option, but just to humour Scorpius, had asked the zookeeper if his son could ride a zebra. Of course, he was answered with a no, but seeing Scorpius laugh so carefree over this was all Harry had wanted. When they were back in the Malfoy Manor, Lulu informed them that Lord Malfoy hadn't arrived back home. So Harry decided to give the house elves a free evening and to show Scorpius how to cook something. Later in life, if he wanted to live outside the wizarding world, he needed to be able to at least cook some pasta. Once Draco came home, Scorpius surprised him with his own pasta and a tomato sauce, which Draco either liked or didn't like, but still complimented his son on. With that, Harry bid goodbye to both Malfoys and appeared away to meet Luna and her family for a game night. To be continued. Hello everyone and welcome back to our Drarry Advent Calendar with the story A Husband for Christmas by Jolly Laugh. Today we're at day 9. Christmas all over again. Draco sat by the open window staring into the oncoming snowstorm. Well, it was probably going to be more of a rainstorm with unnaturally big raindrops, or just overly wet snow. The last meeting hadn't been good. None of them had. Carl was just doing it because his mother told him to. Pascal seemed overly keen on being the one to save him, and last night, Mark. He was just incredibly rude to everyone. How was he supposed to find someone? And by Christmas, no less. The matchmaker had given him 5 names. 3 of these 5 were idiots, and that only left 2. Simon and Tim. What would happen if none of these men were working for him? Could as well just start packing whatever he deemed most important and take as much money from his vault as he could before the ministry would get suspicious. He couldn't. He needed to try, at least for Scorpius. When he got up, he felt the wards move slightly inside. Harry was here. Again. He had shown him too much weakness yesterday. For Merlin's sake, he had almost started crying in front of him. Then again, the way Harry had talked about people healing, it seemed as if he had more experience than he had previously let on. Walking through the hallway again, he heard Scorpius talk to Harry about his favorite writer and how there was a new book published today. He was pretty much talking him into oblivion, though when he turned around the corner and saw the Gryffindor, he was grinning from ear to ear. Surprised, he stopped dead in his tracks and watched Harry and Scorpius. The way Scorpius jumped up and down, excitedly talking about his new book, and Harry, with a sideway smirk, made Draco feel warm. His son had never been so happy with a caregiver, and the way Harry's entire attention lay on Scorpius was proof to Draco that Pansy had been right. He was a perfect caregiver.
So, do you want to go and buy the book?
Harry finally asked, and Scorpius stopped jumping with wide eyes.
I can? Can we go there?
He asked carefully, not really understanding what Harry was talking about. The Gryffindor nodded and grinned.
Of course we can go there, Scorpius. Grab some money and we'll be there as soon as we can.
Scorpius squealed excitedly and ran up the stairs, quite clearly to get some money or whatever else he needed. Draco smiled and walked out of the shadows.
He will spend every second he can at bookshops, Lord Potter. Maybe this wasn't the best idea.
In the way Harry smiled at him, Draco felt his breathing stop for a second.
Well, young men should read a lot, I think. And I do know the author personally, so maybe I can even get Scorpius an autograph. I think he would appreciate that. If you do that, I will officially be dethroned as the best person in Scorp's life.
Draco chuckled.
Harry shook his head. I hardly believe that, Lord Malfoy. Parents aren't as easily dethroned as one might think. If you can get Carly Wolf to give Scorp an autograph, I will be history.
Draco saw Harry smile and look at the tie. He had tried his best to fix it and hoped the Gryffindor wasn't trying to do anything. Luckily he wasn't, and a second later Scorpius appeared, smiling broadly.
Can we go?
He asked Harry, who smiled and nodded.
Bye, Father,
Scorpius called as they walked out of the door. Sighing, Draco turned to look at himself in the mirror. Once he was done, he closed his eyes and left to the restaurant, where he was supposed to meet Simon. Or was it Tim? No, it was Simon. The small restaurant was in the middle of Muggle London, and as soon as he entered the establishment, the waitress led him to the table. Another man already sat there, smiling at him.
Hey, nice to meet you. I'm Simon.
Well, that was refreshing. It wasn't such a stiff conversation starter as he had had with everyone else. Simon was actually even fairly attractive.
Draco, nice to meet you. I'm not late, am I?
While Simon checked his watch, Draco followed his beautiful blue eyes and saw a very expensive watch on his wrist.
No, you're perfectly punctual. I tend to be early, wherever I go.
Smirking, Draco tilted his head slightly.
Why? Just a fear of being any kind of late, actually.
Simon smirked and brushed a strain of dark brown hair out of his face.
My parents met because my mother's date wasn't early, and they started talking. What if that happens to me, you know? I don't want to spend my life with someone I wasn't supposed to be together because I was late one time.
Draco frowned.
That is slightly twisted.
Simon shrugged his shoulders.
I'm constantly paranoid, so my parents decided to use a matchmaker. It's more relaxed since then. Wow, thank you for this life story. I didn't ask anything about.
Draco smirked, and Simon started laughing.
Sorry. I know we should be professional and all this Lord something bullshit, but I prefer to be up close and personal. I mean, if you'd rather be formal.
Simon threw him a questioning glance, and Draco laughed. He shook his head.
No, it's fine. Just something new. New is always better than old.
Simon stated and held up the wine they had just gotten.
To something new.
To be continued. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our Drarry Advent Calendar with the wonderful story A Husband for Christmas by Jollylove. Today we are at day 10, Sleep in Heavenly Peace. It was late when Draco came home from his last meeting. Tim had been nice, really, but nothing could have topped Simon's sincerity and the way he could make Draco forget about all the things happening around him. And so, when he entered the Manor again, he knew who he wanted to go forward with. Luckily, the decision wasn't all too bad. The next few days he was going to get to know Simon more. In fact, he walked straight to his office and sent an owl to the matchmaker with his decision. Next, he walked through the house to find Scorpius, but wherever he looked, he couldn't find Potter nor his son. Finally, when he walked by the door to his son's room, he decided to look in there and stopped quickly. The picture in there was the sweetest thing he had ever seen. Harry sat on a huge armchair, book in hand and clearly sleeping. On his lap sat Scorpius, leaning against his chest, also deeply asleep. Both looked so calm and relaxed. Now that he thought about it, he had never seen Harry as relaxed as he was right now. Smiling softly, Draco snuck closer and grabbed his son. In the process, he also woke up Harry, who inhaled deeply and rubbed his eyes. Shh, Draco said quietly so he wouldn't start talking and waking up Scorpius as well. He placed his son on the bed, placed a kiss on his forehead, and walked to the door, where Harry stood right now.
Sorry for falling asleep. I usually don't do that.
Harry apologized once they were out of his room and had a good distance to it.
Draco smiled. Don't worry, Lord Potter. It took longer today than I thought. Please accept my apology.
Harry inclined his head, and they soon stood in front of the entrance. There Harry hesitated, but turned to Draco nonetheless.
If it would be easier for you, Lord Malfoy, I could also take Scorpius for a day and overnight. Well,
That made it sound as if Harry suspected he was going to have sex with Simon as soon as possible. That wasn't in the Pureblood rulebook. And then again, Simon had said himself that he wasn't following said book.
I will get back to you on that. It might be easier to get to know someone when one isn't pressed for time.
Wishing a good night, Harry left, and Draco frowned at the closed door for a while until he made his way to his room. However, he couldn't sleep, and so for a few hours into the night he got up again and walked to the west part of the manor, hoping to find someone else awake. Draco, darling. He closed the door and looked up to find Astoria in the portrait, smiling back at him. Tears rushed into his eyes, and he suppressed a sob that tightened in his chest.
Astoria, I thought you didn't like it around here anymore.
She smiled and slowly shook her head. Of course I want to be here. Scorpius still comes to talk to me. He told me all about his new caregiver. I'm glad he finally found someone he likes. Draco nodded and wet his lips while tears started running down his cheeks. No, he wasn't ready to give her up. Not even close. Oh, darling, Astoria said quietly. It's all going to be fine. I know you're hurting right now, but it will end someday. Draco gave a sudden sob and tried to get himself under control again as he angrily brushed away the tears.
I just miss you terribly.
Astoria nodded. I know, Draco, darling. I know. Turning away from her, he brushed the last tears out of his face and composed himself again.
I'm sorry.
Don't be, darling. Astoria smiled sadly. You're allowed to be sad. You don't have to hide behind a wall of emotionless facial expressions. We both know that it's not healthy, and Scorpius needs to be able to show his emotions. I don't want him to end up like all our ancestors. Nodding, Draco smiled weakly.
It's just too hard when it comes to you. I don't think I'll ever be able to talk about it with him. Without...
He felt another round of tears fill up his eyes.
Without breaking down.
Astoria seemed to want to reach out and smiled weakly. Oh, poor man. I love you both so much. We both need each other to talk to, right? Draco brushed the tears out of his eyes to see her again, but she was gone. It must have been too much emotion in here. He didn't blame her. He had seen her trying to reach her arms through the painting. She needed to hug him as much as he needed to hug her. Slowly, Draco walked back to his room, stopping by the kitchen to get some ice cream to eat while he watched whatever romantic comedy movie was left over from Astoria's collection. To be continued. Hello everybody and welcome back to our Drarry Adventcalendar with the wonderful story A Husband for Christmas by Jolly Love. Today we're at day 11. Please come home for Christmas.
Who's that?
Scorpius pointed at a picture on Harry's wall and turned back to it. Harry looked up from the kitchen table and smiled sadly. Luckily, Scorpius hadn't seen it.
Ginny, the picture is standing in front of us, the first World Cup she's played at. England won.
He explained as he cut the tomatoes for the salad.
Wow!
Scorpius' eyes widened and turned back to Harry.
That's so cool. I want to play Kidditch too. Can I be in the World Cup as well?
Harry chuckled.
If you're good, absolutely.
Scorpius grinned and looked at the picture again. He soon found another one of her.
Are you married then?
He asked, pointing at the wedding picture. They stood in front of the burrow, trying to get ready for the actual picture. Harry was getting something out of her hair, and she straightened his tie with a love-struck expression towards him. George had just accidentally pressed the button too soon. Neither Ginny nor Harry had argued against that being the official wedding picture. It was beautiful.
We were, yes.
Harry smiled softly as Scorpius turned to look at him.
She died 9 years ago.
He looked at the wedding picture and marveled at how innocent they both looked.
Sometimes I forget that she died and I think she's just out training.
I'm sorry.
Scorpius sat down on the opposite side of the table.
I lost my mother 4 years ago. I know what you go through when you forget. Sometimes I ask Father if Mother is by the stables, and I realize that I made a mistake when I look at him.
Harry nodded. The way Draco trembled when he had straightened his tie showed that he still missed her. People might tell him to move on, but Harry wasn't one to talk. He hadn't moved on, and it was almost a decade ago.
You know this isn't your fault, right?
Scorpius sighed.
I know, but sometimes I wish I could help Father get over it, somehow.
Harry smiled as he got up and placed the pasta into the boiling water.
You can only tell him that you'll be there if he wants to talk. You can't help him otherwise.
Maybe you can help him?
Scorpius asked hopefully.
He can't sleep most nights. I wander around the house.
Sighing, Harry sat down at the table again.
If people don't want any help, we can't force them to get any.
Scorpius looked at Harry for a long time silently. Then he tilted his head and asked,
Do you want help?
No, Harry smiled sadly. It's been 9 years. People tell me it should be fine, so I'm fine.
You're crying.
Scorpius looked at Harry carefully. Nodding, Harry brushed the tears out of his face.
I know.
He saw Scorpius' worried expression and smiled through his tears.
Don't worry, it usually only lasts for 5 minutes.
Scorpius bit his lower lip and frowned.
Did you ever think about having children?
He seemed really careful with the question, as if he wasn't sure if he could ask something like that.
No, but I'd like to think that we could have been amazing parents.
Harry smiled. He decided not to give Scorpius more burdens. He was already crying because of Ginny. If he were to talk about James, the waterfall was flowing and he couldn't stop it for an hour maybe. In fact, it had been the last game Ginny wanted to do before she would take a break and have a child. Luckily, Harry had gotten himself under control rather quickly again. Scorpius smiled weakly.
I think you would have been a great father. You're much more fun than mine anyway.
Harry smiled. Well, your father has to go through a hard time right now, Scorpius. You shouldn't be so hard on him.
I'm not.
Scorpius shrugged his shoulders and got up to look at the pasta.
I'm just saying you're very good at being there for me.
Smirking, Harry turned to look at him.
If you want, Scorpius, you can also go and get some ice cream from Ron.
Widening his eyes, Scorpius jumped up and nodded.
Yes, but do we need to be quick? Doesn't he close in 20 minutes?
Harry grinned.
He's my best friend from childhood, Scorpius. Of course he'll open for us. We might not get something fancy, but a scoop of ice cream is always good, right?
It seemed as if, in all this ice cream talk, Scorpius had forgotten about Ginny, which was what Harry wanted to achieve. Of course, he loved to go out and meet Ron again, but his main goal has been to ease Scorpius' mind. And so they both ended up in Ron's ice cream shop a few hours after closing. Ron had clearly gone out of his way and wiped up the ice cream brownie for Scorpius again, which he had eyed with such hunger that Harry wasn't sure if he had eaten enough dinner or just pretended. Both adults ate a scoop of cookies ice cream, which was by far Harry's favorite, and while Ron talked about Hermione and her career in the ministry, the door suddenly opened and a young girl ran in and hugged her father. Following her was Hermione herself and the boy behind her.
Good evening, everyone.
Harry greeted them. Scorpius seemed a little scared of the new children as he concentrated on his ice cream, not looking up. Harry smiled softly and turned to Hermione.
Hi, Hermione. It's so nice to see you again.
Harry, I haven't seen you in weeks. Where have you been? Hermione hugged him tight and turned to look at the child in the corner eating his ice cream. Smiling, Harry nodded.
This is Scorpius. I'm his caregiver. His father's having a late meeting, so he's staying with me overnight.
Rose smiled at the blonde boy.
Hi, I'm Rose. I'm going to Hogwarts next year. When are you going?
Scorpius said,
Next year.
Blushing a little. As if that was what Rose had hoped for, she started talking about everything she knew of Hogwarts, which wasn't too little, and got so overly excited that Scorpius soon joined in on the fun, while Hugo watched with huge eyes what his sister was talking about. To be continued. Hello everyone and welcome back to our Drarry Advent Calendar with the title A Husband for Christmas by the wonderful Jolly Love. Today we are reading day number 12. 12 Days of Christmas. Harry woke up, Scorpius bright and early, and they walked through Muggle London into Dean and Seamus' little cafe. Well, it wasn't that small, since it was a 2-story building with a gallery, but it was well hidden and also well liked. Most people who knew about it told it only to their best friends or closest family members, since it was such a hidden gem. It was a little early, but the door was slightly ajar, which made Harry chuckle, and he opened it. As soon as Harry entered, Dean had seen him, basically ran towards him.
Harry Potter, I don't believe it. You're still in London. I thought you wanted to travel the world.
Smiling weakly, Harry shrugged his shoulders and then hugged his friend.
Plans get changed all the time, Dean. This here is my friend Scorpius. I wanted to ask if we could get breakfast here. Absolutely,
Seamus answered behind Dean, who yelped as he hadn't expected his boyfriend to be there. He was pulled back by his waist, as Seamus had thrown his hand around his boyfriend. Fiancé, actually.
Come on in.
Scorpius chuckled as they entered, and Seamus led them to a table on the mezzanine.
We've got all kinds of breakfast platters. Vegetarian and non-vegetarian, and then small, medium, or large.
Large!
Scorpius chimed in, and Harry laughed. Seamus smirked.
So, large?
He looked at Harry amused.
Non-vegetarian large, yes,
he confirmed, and Scorpius' eyes grew wide.
But you need to eat all of it. If anything is left over, we'll never come back here.
Scorpius threw his hand in front of his mouth, and Seamus inhaled sharply as well. Then leaned down and whispered loudly.
What you can't eat, I'll eat for you. Then you can still come here.
Giggling, Scorpius nodded, and Harry smirked while Seamus winked at Harry.
Coffee, tea, anything else?
Hot chocolate?
Scorpius asked, and quickly widened his eyes before he changed his question.
Could I have a hot chocolate, please?
Absolutely, young man. Since you're so polite, it's even on the house.
Seamus grinned. Harry chuckled.
I'm the one who's paying anyway.
Seamus snorted.
Then it's double the price.
Before Harry could respond, he already loved how Scorpius was laughing loudly about this comment. Dean called from the bottom floor.
Seamus, we're opening in 5 minutes. Get your lame bot down here.
My bot is perfect.
Seamus called down and grinned. He then turned back to Harry.
Milk? Coffee? Yes, please.
Nodding, Seamus jumped down the stairs and joined Dean at the bottom floor. Scorpius grinned from ear to ear.
I like it here.
Harry chuckled.
Oh, I do too. I haven't been here for quite a while, but since you're staying over, I figure we should do something fun for the remainder of the morning.
While they waited for their breakfast, this little cafe filled quickly with staff and customers, and after half an hour it was completely filled. Christmas music filled the air, and the happy chatter of customers made Harry smile. After some time, Scorpius, who had been quietly observing everything, smiled at Harry.
So, what do you do on Christmas?
I'm usually spending it with my family.
Scorpius didn't need to know that this meant sitting in front of Ginny and James's grave and eating Christmas cookies, telling them about his life until Neville, George, and Ron would come by and take him home. It was always the same, and this Christmas would mark the 10th anniversary of them being gone.
Sounds fun.
Scorpius answered and looked at the arriving platter. He once again looked so hungry, as if he hadn't eaten anything for days. Harry chuckled as Dean placed the platter down personally. The Gryffindor grinned at Harry.
I've been informed that he'll be paying twice for hot chocolate, and...
Harry rolled his eyes while Scorpius laughed loudly. Dean chuckled and waved his hand to show him that the comment was not true.
Please enjoy your larger breakfast.
He leaned over to Scorpius.
And if you can't eat all of it, call me. We'll get through it together.
He winked at the blond boy, who snorted and nodded enthusiastically.
That wasn't the plan, guys.
Harry commented, smirking, but Dean pretended not to hear him, and waved when he walked back down the stairs. In the end, Scorpius actually managed to finish the platter, with Harry, of course, and they went to Malfoy Manor around 12:30, just to see someone else leave. Harry wasn't sure, but he thought he had recognized the person, though with how little he saw of him or her, he could have been wrong.
Lord Malfoy?
Harry greeted Draco, who stood outside, and smiled at him.
I trust you had a nice meeting.
Draco inclined his head, but decided not to answer. Not that Harry thought he would. He was the caregiver, after all. Before the Slytherin could go back inside, Harry cleared his throat and wet his lips.
I might need to tell you that I will not be available tomorrow. I've already planned to help another family. I hope this does not delay your plans, Lord Malfoy. Oh, it does not. Thank you for telling me today, Lord Potter. I wish you a pleasant day.
While Harry walked back through the wards, he thought that Draco looked a little shaken. Well, he did have to marry someone to keep his house and his son in the house, so he was allowed to look a little shaken. To be continued. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our wonderful Drarry Advent Calendar. The story is A Husband for Christmas by the wonderful, talented Jolly Love, and today we are at day 13, Winter Wonderland. Draco had to admit that he would have liked to have Harry around. Maybe he could have taken care of Scorpius while they entered the cemetery. He had always hated this thing. So much sadness was around, and looked as if all the dead people were still alive by the different graves. Surrey's grave was close to a magical weeping willow, though not as violent as the one at Hogwarts. Surrey had always liked the garden, so he had decided to keep flowers and plants on her grave. Placing down a few flowers, he felt Scorpius jolt to life, as if he had seen something surprising. His son then went exploring, which Draco always had allowed, as long as he hadn't left the cemetery. He knew there was too much emotion in this grave, and having been there once every 6 months was already too much for Scorpius. Meanwhile, Draco smiled down at the grave and placed his hand on the cold marble stone. He needed to let go. Simon had already told him yesterday that he was not going to agree to a marriage if he was still mourning for his late wife. She had been dead for almost half a decade, and Draco had to admit that he was right. So this was the last time he was going to visit the cemetery, and Astoria's portrait would be placed in the portrait hall, where she should have been placed 3 years ago. Scorpius came back and looked as if he had seen a ghost, which confirmed Draco's thoughts that maybe it was time to move on. If not for his sake, then at least for his son's. On their way home, Draco thought about what Simon had said. He wanted to meet Scorpius soon as well, since they would be soon a family. Sadly, Simon was on a business trip for 2 days, so he couldn't meet him until the 17th. Hopefully that wasn't a problem then. Scorpius didn't like someone. It could go really bad. As they passed Muggle London, Scorpius suddenly seemed to lead him somewhere when he grabbed his hand and almost made him walk faster into the other direction of where he had wanted to go. About 5 minutes later, they stood in front of an ice cream shop.
What is that? How is there an ice cream shop in the middle of winter?
Harry showed me.
Scorpius smiled big and knocked at the glass since it seemed closed. A girl appeared and looked over the counter, widening her eyes as soon as she saw Scorpius, who waved at her. How did he know her, and who was she? And also, how did he make an acquaintance in the past few days? The red-headed girl ran around the counter and opened the door, smiling brightly.
Hi, Scorpius. How are you?
Oh, I'm good. This is my dad. Can we come in?
The redhead nodded and smiled as she stepped back and opened the door for the two of them to enter. She then closed the door again.
Mum and Dad are out, but I'm sure they'll be back soon.
And they just left you in the shop alone?
Not alone,
another voice said, and Draco turned around to see Harry leaning in the doorframe, smiling softly. Scorpius smiled broadly, ran through the room, and fell around Harry's neck while he laughed. It warmed Draco's heart to see his son being so close to someone. The last time he had seen Scorpius being so happy was when he was 5 years old, a few months before his mother passed. He had never been the same since. However, with Harry, Draco's son seemed to be the old self.
Would the two of you like some ice cream?
Harry asked when Scorpius was back on the floor. Draco frowned. He hadn't really seen Harry being informal with him. He had to say that he liked the much more relaxed state of his caregiver.
I doubt you could just give out free ice cream. If nobody in this room tells Ron anything, I think we could get away with it. Do you agree?
He asked the children, who all nodded enthusiastically. This made Draco feel so warm and soft that he could only smile over it. Harry then looked at him and smiled as well.
Lord Malfoy, would you like to join in on the ice cream fun?
Scorpius was already nodding for him, so he chuckled and shrugged his shoulders.
I would be a killjoy if I decided not to join, wouldn't I?
Only a little,
Harry answered with a very unprofessional wink. Not that Draco cared much, as he started to think that he liked his caregiver like that much more. Even though seeing how polite Harry could be was also something Draco somehow couldn't get enough of. Scorpius walked into the kitchen, asking Harry about a brownie, while Draco sat down at the table. Within a few seconds, all the children had something to eat, and Harry brought a creation out of the kitchen Draco had never seen. It looked like a piece of caramel cake. Harry placed his own ice cream bowl down and handed Draco the caramel cake.
It's an ice cream brownie. It's Scorpius' choice for you, not mine.
Harry held his hand in the air and smirked.
So if you don't like it, you have to blame your son.
Hey!
Scorpius said and glared at Harry, though with the chocolate around his mouth, it didn't have the desired effect, and the Gryffindor shrugged his shoulders, grinning. Soon enough, the children were done with their ice cream and went to play a game on one of the tables, whilst Harry sat next to Draco. It was at the same time uncomfortable and exactly what Draco needed right now. To be continued. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Drarry Adventcalendar with the wonderful story A Husband for Christmas by Jolly Love. Today is day 14. Let it snow. Draco sighed as he changed the direction of where he was walking and headed to the kitchen instead. He shouldn't talk to Astoria, right? Not after he had spent such a nice fire call with Simon, and after he had told him to get some distance between himself and the portrait. It could have been worse, having to marry someone by Christmas. At least Simon was nice, and he seemed to be interested in Draco and even Scorpius. Not many people were even slightly paying attention to his son when he would meet them. The fact that Simon wanted to meet him was proof to Draco that things could work out eventually. Grabbing some ice cream, he smirked over the memory of Harry and Scorpius. These two seemed to have grown on each other. Scorpius was talking about Harry all the time, and when they were together, Draco couldn't get enough of the teasing that was happening between the two of them. They seemed to be more alike than Draco thought he was with Scorpius. When dinner came, Harry had ordered pizza and given Draco's son a plain cheese one, saying something about having to pay some kind of hot chocolate twice, which had made Scorpius burst out in a fit of giggles, and Harry quickly changed the pizza to the one Scorpius had actually ordered. And when Draco finally realized whose ice cream shop they were all staying in, namely Weasley and Granger walking through the door, they hadn't even behaved weirdly, only greeted him respectfully and then hugged Scorpius as if he was a regular customer there. Eating the cold ice cream right now, Draco wandered to the TV room and sat down. He started watching some horror movie, not really concentrating on anything. Once the children had left with Granger and Draco was about to leave with Scorpius, he saw Harry turn to Weasley.
We ate some ice cream, by the way. The children are sworn into secrecy.
He had smirked, and Weasley chuckled. His eyes had a glint of mischief.
I will have fun asking Rose and Hugo if they know anything about missing ice cream.
Harry nodded and winked at him.
Want me to clean up here? No, go home, Harry. You look tired.
Weasley had and frowned at Harry and shaking his head.
You're spending too much time with her again, aren't you?
The question still didn't make sense to Draco. They hadn't been taking too much time from Harry for it to be an again. Who could he mean? No matter how much he thought of it, he couldn't figure it out. The monster was just showing its ugly head, and the people in the TV were shooting at it wildly when Draco heard footsteps and turned to look at Scorpius with a stuffed teddy in his arm. He had always looked so innocent and cute whenever it was in the middle of the night and he was out of bed.
Can't sleep?
His son asked and walked into the room, sitting down on the couch next to him while placing the teddy on his lap. Draco smiled over the simple role reversal.
No, and you?
Scorpius shook his head.
Is Simon going to live with us?
Yes, Scorp. If I marry him, he's going to live here.
Draco briefly wondered where this conversation was going when Scorpius shook his head.
I don't want Simon as my dad. I want Harry.
Taken aback by this sudden honesty, Draco frowned at his son and found him hugging his teddy bear closely, avoiding eye contact as if he feared Draco was about to freak out. He probably would have if he hadn't been so taken by surprise.
Why would you say that, Scorp? You don't even know how Simon is. We'll meet him soon.
Nobody is better than Harry.
Scorpius was still avoiding eye contact. Draco sighed.
Listen, son. We can't always get what we want. I know it's Christmas and you probably already wrote a wish list to Santa, but he can't hand out love.
Scorpius frowned.
So you're saying you love Simon?
That was a good question. Did he love Simon?
Well, no.
There was nothing when he thought of him. Not like when he remembered seeing Harry and Scorpius together.
But there's this Muggle idiom saying that if life hands you lemons, you make lemonade. Which means what?
Scorpius tilted his head. Draco placed an arm around his son's shoulder.
You make the best of what is given, Scorp.
His son didn't seem to get it.
Which is why you have to marry Harry. Scorpius, listen.
Couldn't even start to explain why it wouldn't work, but his 10-year-old son shook his hand and interrupted him quickly.
No, Harry and you work together. You like him, he likes you, I know that. There's no rules saying you can't marry Harry. Why are you not seeing what's right in front of your eyes?
Because I've already agreed to marry Simon, Scorp. I can't get out of the contract unless he would break one of the rules we have set up.
Adults are just dumb.
Scorpius answered and left the room without any further comments. To be continued. Hello everyone and welcome back to our Drarry Advent Calendar. Today we are at day 15. We wish you the merriest. They arrived punctual to see a familiar owl fly into the manor. He frowned and decided to investigate when he almost walked into Draco. He jumped back and inclined his head respectfully.
Lord Malfoy, I'm so sorry. I hadn't meant to walk into you.
Draco snorted and Harry frowned slightly.
Well, that's usually the case when you say so, Lord Potter. I haven't met someone who intentionally walked into people.
Smirking, Harry shook his head. He then frowned at a dark brown owl with an unusual pattern on its back. He knew this owl very well.
Lord Malfoy, I do hope you will excuse my inquisitiveness. Whom does this owl belong to?
He asked carefully. Looking down at the owl, Draco frowned.
Simon Hall. Why are you interested in that?
Harry widened his eyes by the mention of this name, Simon Hall. So he had found another victim.
You should marry him. He's just after your money. I'm sorry?
Draco frowned and crossed his arms.
I believe that is my own choice who I want to marry. He will take from you whatever you have and leave you to die by the side of the road. Trust me, he's done it before.
He really didn't want to say that Simon had been the one to take everything from him. That was the reason he lived in a small house outside of London. This man had taken everything he owned, almost everything, and sold it. When he had finally realized it, it had been too late. And with Simon having forced his way into Harry's life half a year after Ginny had died, he had just accepted him as his own savior, never realizing that he was a bad person. Draco, however, hadn't seen this side of Simon as he narrowed his eyes.
I'm going to marry Simon. Stop accepting your fate as it is. You're like a turkey voting for an early Christmas.
He threw his hands into the air. How had he not realized yet that Simon wasn't the person he pretended to be?
He's not as polite as you think, Draco.
Harry shook his head about to say more when Draco glared at him.
And I think you're forgetting yourself, Lord Potter.
Harry stopped in the middle of his action and froze. He looked at Draco coldly before he straightened his posture, threw back his shoulders and raised his head to look at him straight into the eyes.
You're right, Lord Malfoy. I have forgotten myself.
He stared at Draco for a moment before he bowed for 2 seconds.
With the utmost respect, I would like to offer you my deepest apologies for stepping out of line. I have nothing further to say. Your son will be home by exactly 4 o'clock. Have a pleasant afternoon, Lord Malfoy.
Harry inclined his head without looking at Draco and turned round to leave the room. Scorpius looked at Harry interested when they left the manor.
Was that your first fight with my father? It was epic.
Despite the anger still rushing through his veins, Harry chuckled at Scorpius' comment, and they went to the sledding hill again. He didn't like to go far away, and maybe Draco would come to his senses soon. Who knew? Even though he would have liked to see Draco again, telling him that he was right, the Slytherin didn't show up all day. When Harry ended up bringing him home by 4 o'clock on the dot, he found that he was keyed out of the wards.
Lord Potter, I thank you for your services.
Draco appeared in front of him, a cheque in his hand.
From today on, I won't need a caregiver anymore. I wish you a pleasant Christmas with your family.
Harry accepted a cheque, about to say that he really liked taking care of Scorpius, when Draco closed the door in front of his nose with a bang. Felt the wards pushing him out of the Malfoy Manor area and sighed. He couldn't tell Malfoy what he should do. He was an adult. He just hoped that Scorpius didn't have to suffer under his mind games. He apparated into Diagon Alley, walking through the side alleys to Neville's flower shop. Inside, he once again found the 3 rebels running around laughing.
"Hi, Jamie,"
Harry said when the eldest Longbottom fell around his neck.
"How are you doing today?"
Jamie grinned. He grabbed Harry's hand and showed him a pot of small green plants.
"These are mine. Dad said if I look after them and they grow fine, I can sell them myself and keep the money."
Harry nodded, impressed.
"If they can be sold, give me a fire call, Jamie. I'll be your first customer."
The boys squealed with excitement, and Harry caught Neville watching them with a smirk on his lips. When Jamie ran off, Harry walked to his old friend.
"You are going to regret offering to buy a plant from Jamie. He's going to try and sell them all to you."
Neville greeted him and hugged him as well.
"How are you?"
"The same old." Harry shrugged his shoulders.
"Simon's trying to scam the Malfoys, so that's new."
Neville sighed.
"Oh, shit. So he's still around. I thought after what Ron did to him, he decided not to be around London anymore."
Harry chuckled. If Simon had destroyed Harry's life, Ron had destroyed Simon's life about 1,000% more. By the time he had still been in Aura, and all the time Ron had gone and looked for stolen items around Simon's house, Harry's old house. He had gotten a few memorabilia out of there and annoyed Simon to no end, also letting loose some of George's pranks in there until Simon had finally complained to the Ministry. Not that it had stopped the torment, as eventually the whole Weasley family and all of Harry's friends had found out about it, and oh, you didn't want to be on their bad side. And so, after 2 years, he had left the country. He gave Harry the 6 lilies and 1 black rose and shook his hand when Harry wanted to pay.
"Free of charge today, Harry." "Thanks, Nev. Tell them I said hi."
Neville hugged him, and Harry nodded, walking towards the cemetery to see his family again. To be continued. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our Drarry Advent Calendar with the wonderful story A Husband for Christmas by Jolly Love. Today we're at day 16. We need a little Christmas. Sighing, Harry rolled out of his bed and got up to make some coffee. He didn't want to admit it, but he already missed Scorpius. With his smarts and his happy-go-lucky attitude, Harry had always liked to be around him, even if he was a little shy around strangers, like a Rose or Hugo at first. He was such a sweet boy. And it reminded him of what he could have had. James would have been roughly the same age now. He looked at the wedding picture on the wall and brushed a tear out of his face. Was there ever an end to his suffering? Sighing, he turned to the table, only to see a light brown owl arriving. Harry widened his eyes and smiled broadly. That was the Weasley Wizard's Wheezes owl. He gave her a treat and untied the parchment, which made her fly away again.
"Dear Harry, your Hogwarts Survivor Kit is ready. I've worked on it a little bit outside of regular work hours, and you can thank Angelina that she hasn't killed me yet. You can come pick it up whenever you want. George."
George was so fast. Harry drowned the still-hot coffee and quickly healed his burnt tongue before he grabbed the parchment and apparated into Diagon Alley again. He rushed through the empty street and finally made it to the shop, where he knocked on the door. Fred opened and yawned instead of greeting him. Harry chuckled.
"Is Mira still crying through the night, then?"
he asked. Nodding, Fred sighed.
"Ned is in the back. I think he's just finished pecking her with Survival Kit."
He then walked to a couch and fell down, almost half asleep again. Harry smirked and walked through the shop, knocking on the door towards George's workshop.
"Morning, George." "Hey, I haven't heard you enter."
George got up and grinned.
"Your son let me in before falling asleep again."
George sighed and nodded.
"Yeah, I don't think you'll be able to do much today. Nevertheless, I'll finish a present. Everything is included, even a coupon in case McGonagall finds the survival kit. Just keep the coupon somewhere she can't find it, and everything will be refunded."
Harry snorted.
"If I wouldn't know you any better, I would say you're in a war with the headmistress."
George laughed.
"I choose not to answer any questions regarding Hogwarts."
He grinned.
"Let's just say that Fred usually has to go to McGonagall right away and empty his whole trunk in front of her. This is giving me a lot of practice in how to hide pranks right in front of someone's eye. If she finds it, I know it wasn't hidden well enough. You are the most brilliantly evil non-Slytherin I've ever seen."
Harry laughed and grabbed his wallet. George pushed it back.
It seems it's for someone special, so don't even think about giving me money.
Harry narrowed his eyes.
Come on, George. You've been working on this for most of December. You can't just give me something like that.
But I can. He grinned.
Take it. Buy something nice for you for Christmas. Ginny would have been on my side, you know it.
Chuckling, Harry held his hand into the air.
No further discussions, George. Thank you, really.
Next up was the leaky cauldron. He walked in to find Parvati behind the counter. She was wearing a simple black t-shirt with her name on it and looked up from cleaning the counter when she heard someone enter.
Harry, she beamed. I haven't seen you in ages.
Smiling, he walked towards her and hugged her once when she was around the counter.
I haven't really had time to come any sooner.
A blatant lie, both of them knew it, but they accepted it.
Oh, you're good. I heard somewhere that you're Draco Malfoy's son's caregiver.
Harry sighed and chuckled.
Did Hermione talk?
Parvati smirked.
You know she did. She can't keep secrets anymore. And our monthly book club has turned more into a gossip and drinks club than anything else.
Well, sounds fun too,
Harry offered and grinned at Parvati's outraged expression.
Could I ask for a favour? I've got a friend who could end up being homeless for a while. I wanted to ask if maybe I could reserve a room for him, just in case.
Nodding, Parvati walked back to a book and sat down at an empty table.
How long?
Harry smiled and sat down as well.
Maybe we'll start with a month. As I've said, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I just want to help him should anything bad go down.
Of course. I've got a free room for your friend. If he needs it, the password is Chocolate Frog. You appreciate the password, right?
She asked and grinned when he rolled his eyes.
Draco Tart would have been more in my favour, but chocolate frogs aren't that bad.
With all of this planned, Harry returned home and started a letter.
Dear Scorpius, I'm sorry I had to go so quickly. I hope you understand that it had nothing to do with you. I'm sure your father loves you very much. I'm sending you my Christmas present for you early. The owls tend to go crazy around this time. Don't open it up until Christmas. Also, if you end up losing the house, I've asked the leaky cauldron to keep a room open. It's already paid. Just say Chocolate Frog and they'll know what you mean. It has been a pleasure getting to know you, Scorpius, and I hope you have a wonderful Christmas and a Happy New Year. Enter Hogwarts next year. Best wishes, Harry.
To be continued. Hello everyone and welcome back to our wonderful Drarry Advent Calendar with the story A Husband for Christmas by Jolly Love. Today we are at day 17. Here comes Santa Claus. What Harry had told him never left Draco's mind. Was Simon really only after his money? And how had Harry even known about him? Maybe there was more to this story than he had thought. Well, whatever it was, Simon was finally coming by and meeting Scorpius. Draco really hoped that these two would be as close as Harry was, or had been with his son. However, what if they weren't? Draco didn't like to think about it, since it meant that his son would be unhappy with him for the rest of their lives, probably. When Simon appeared outside the manor, Draco was slightly nervous and opened the door himself.
Hello, Simon.
Good morning, Draco. Simon looked around and grinned. This action was a little confusing to Draco, so he decided to just ignore it. Maybe one day it would make sense to him.
Before we go anywhere, I wanted to introduce you to my son, Scorpius.
Draco motioned his son to come down the stairs. He had already seen him hiding up there, and without any further questions, Scorpius walked down. Seemed to be a little shy, though he definitely used the pureblood rules as a way of pretending to be more confident. Simon grinned at Draco's son.
So, you're a scorpion?
Simon asked.
Scorpius?
Draco frowned a little. Had Simon never paid attention to when he was talking about his son? He had never called him Scorpion. And well, Simon had apparently not even heard Scorpius correcting his name, as he was already on to the next question.
Do you like being a wizard?
He grinned as if this was the most important question. Suppressing a groan, Draco started to realize that even though he wanted Simon to be different, he was still going to be the same. Looking for money, status, or whatever else he could get from him. Scorpius meant nothing to him. Nevertheless, his son was answering the question quickly.
Yes, I'm looking forward to being at Hogwarts. I can't wait to see what house I belong in. Scorpius?
His father warned him, and Draco saw Scorpius nodding lightly. In pureblood rules, Hogwarts houses weren't supposed to be discussed. Everyone was going to Slytherin anyway. Simon grinned at Draco and turned back to the child.
Just be careful of Slytherin, young man. Why?
Along with Scorpius, Draco was frowning at Simon. Didn't he know that Draco was in Slytherin? Basically, all his ancestors had been in Slytherin, and he had never heard anybody say that, so someone needed to be aware of them. Usually that was what people would say to each other, not to a potential Slytherin. Simon had apparently not read the change in both their body languages as he sighed.
Because they are bad people in Slytherin.
Scorpius shook his head.
Well, Harry said it doesn't matter where I go to. I can be...
He couldn't even finish his sentence when Simon interrupted him.
Oh, your Harry said that, huh?
How well did Simon know Harry? It seemed as if he knew him rather well, judging from the evil glare he was throwing at Scorpius. Harry had tried to warn him about Simon, right? He wasn't who Draco thought he was, he had said. If he wasn't honest about the marriage, then... Maybe he just wanted to make Draco feel secure and then drop him on his wedding. If he wanted Malfoy Manor, he could secure it that way. Draco suddenly felt really ill. The look around the house when he had entered for the first time matched up with someone who was looking to buy something. Simon wasn't trying to help. He was trying to scheme. Meanwhile, the conversation had still been going on. Scorpius, of course, defended Harry.
Yes, and he also said that the good comes from within people, not houses.
Maybe he just likes to think that. As long as you don't go to Slytherin, we will be best pals.
Simon grinned.
What Harry said.
Simon glared at the little boy and raised his voice so it echoed from the wall.
Let me tell you something about your precious Harry Potter, Scorpion. He is a liar and a cheat. Do you think he could have been so famous without pushing some people aside? He was supposed to be there when... Stop!
Draco glared at Simon. He had Scorpius sobbing as he ran up the stairs, but decided to deal with Simon first.
How dare you talk to my son like that? If he likes Harry Potter, you will leave him alone with that at once.
Simon seemingly wasn't able to come back from showing his true colours as he now glared at Draco.
Oh, you think you're so smart, don't you, Draco?
He laughed maniacally as he shook his head.
Face it, Draco. I'm the only one who can save you right now. I don't need you. You're just like the others, trying to brag to people that you're the one to make me better. Well, you're not the one.
Draco pointed his finger at him, glaring with an ice-cold look. It didn't seem to bother Simon, who just grinned.
Too bad I'm one you're left with, Draco. So either we're married by Christmas, or I'm moving into my new house, your Manor. Either way, I'll live here soon. Fuck you, Simon. Learn how to respect people. You'll never live here. It's still mine, and I will fight until it's over.
Draco pointed to the door, shaking with emotions. He had first of all just broken the pureblood rule of swearing, but that wasn't the important part. Harry had been right. Simon was too good to be true, and now he was paying the price. He needed to come up with an idea how to get someone in less than 10 days. Was there even a possibility?
How about you give up already?
Simon asked as he walked to the door.
You're stupid anyway. You and your coward son can go to hell for all that I care.
With that, he closed the door with a bang. To be continued. Hello everybody and welcome back to our wonderful Drarry Advent Calendar with the story A Husband for Christmas by Jollylove. Today we are at day 18. Run, Rudolph, run. After an eventful day, like he had yesterday, Draco had tried to talk to Scorpius, but he had pretended not to be there. Even during meals. Not that Draco had blamed him. How had he been so blind to think that Simon would be helping him? Would the others in this matchmaker pool have been any better? Or were all of them just out for money? When it was time for lunch, Draco sighed and decided to talk to his son, since he once again didn't show up for meals. And so he knocked on his door and listened for a sound.
Scorpius, I need to apologize. Please open the door.
No sounds. Draco sighed.
Scorp, I know you don't trust me right now, but I want to tell you that I'm not going to marry Simon.
Harry was right. There was still no noise. Draco frowned and pressed the door handle down. If anything, the mentioning of Harry should have at least made Scorpius say something. The room was empty. No Scorpius.
What?
Draco stood there for a good second before registering what was going on. He grabbed his jacket and saw Scorpius gone. Where was he? When had he left? Did he go right after Simon had left? Draco shivered. Oh, Merlin, please let him be safe. Draco spent the rest of the afternoon checking the surrounding area, but he found nothing. Not even a tracing spell revealed where Scorpius had gone. Maybe he wanted to see Harry himself. But for that, Scorpius needed to walk to London and then to wherever Harry was living. Did he even know where that was? And how could he get to London? Well, he was already walking for possibly a full day. Still, Draco needed backup. He apparated into a side alley in Muggle London and found himself close to the ice cream shop Scorpius had dragged him to. And without thinking, he walked through the rainy streets and entered the shop. Weasley stood behind the counter and smiled at him as he entered.
Good afternoon. Can I get you anything? Have you seen my son since yesterday?
Draco couldn't be bothered to be polite. He needed to find Scorpius. Apparently, Weasley hadn't thought he would ask something like that as he opened his eyes, rather surprised.
Scorpius? No, I haven't seen him.
He turned around to the kitchen.
Rose, darling.
When the red-headed girl showed her face, Weasley smiled.
Have you seen Scorpius around since yesterday?
Rose shook her head.
No, but he wrote a letter telling me he'd like to come by someday soon.
Did you recognize the owl?
Draco asked, hoping that Rose had a great memory, but she just shrugged her shoulders sheepishly. Weasley placed a hand on Draco's shoulder.
Don't worry. Harry's usually arriving any second now. I'm sure he'll help you find your son.
As if to prove a point, the door opened not a second later, and the black-haired wizard walked in with Pansy's 2 children.
Get something small, children. We're not staying here forever.
Harry froze when he found Draco standing there. Draco too was frozen, but mostly out of fear for his son, and not because he saw a glimmer of hope in Harry's eyes before it died quickly. Luckily, he didn't have to say anything, as Weasley was talking for him.
Hey, Harry, Lord Malfoy can't find his son. If you go look for him too, I'll look after Parkinson's little ones.
Nodding slowly, Harry seemed to come out of his frozen state, while the children cheered for being able to stay at this amazing place. He cleared his throat and closed the door behind himself.
Where have you checked, Lord Malfoy?
Harry asked, with a certain distance in his voice. For some reason, it made Draco tear up. Scorpius' flight and Harry's distance was more than he could bear. He felt his hand tremble, and long before, his knees gave out under him, and he fell to the floor, tears streaming down his face.
Hey, it's okay, Draco.
A voice broke through the barriers. Draco felt something soft under him. He wasn't on the floor anymore. Did he pass out? Did he find Scorpius yet?
We'll find him, okay? Calm down, nothing's going to happen to him.
Draco was breathing rapidly and quickly realized that they were in the back of the ice cream shop on a sofa, Harry next to him having placed a protective arm around him. It only took Draco a few seconds to calm down, and he rubbed his eyes, slightly ashamed of having lost control in front of Harry. However, Harry didn't seem bothered as he rubbed his back and was whispering calming things at him. After a few seconds, Draco was back to normal as one could be with a child missing, and he got up.
I was checking Malfoy Manor, then this ice cream shop. I don't know where else to look.
Harry sighed.
I might know.
He offered his hand for a side operation, and shortly thereafter they arrived at the Leaky Cauldron. Walking through the crowd, Harry led Draco to the counter where one of the Patil twins was working.
Hey, Pavati, did someone use the code Chocolate Frog?
He asked, and Draco frowned slightly. Yes, half an hour ago. He looked a little young. It's room 24. Harry nodded and dragged Draco up the stairs to the private rooms as if he had lived here for years. He seemed to be familiar with everything. In front of the room, Harry knocked before simply opening the door. Draco froze when he finally found his child sitting on the bed, head in his hands, crying. The only things that made him react was when he saw Scorpius throwing himself at Harry, who had just enough time stabilizing himself before he tightened his hug around the child.
"It's okay, Scorpius. It's going to be okay,"
Harry said quietly while Scorpius started crying again.
"Nothing bad is going to happen to you anymore, okay? Your dad is here to protect you. I'll stay too if you guys want me to. It's going to be fine."
Scorpius nodded and clutched Harry's shirt in his hands.
"Please don't leave me again,"
he whispered.
"I want you to be my dad."
Harry seemed gobsmacked as he looked down at the crying child.
"You need some sleep, Scorpius. Have you been walking the whole day?"
Draco saw Scorpius relax infinitely while he talked to Harry and suddenly felt so guilty. He'd wanted to rip his son away from somebody like him. Harry was only supposed to be in his life for a few days, but looking at that, he knew that his son probably also thought of Harry as his father. While Harry carefully placed the half-asleep Scorpius in the bed, tucking him in, Draco sat down on a chair on the opposite side of the room. Harry looked at him slightly concerned and sat down next to him.
Sorry,"
Draco finally said after being quiet for quite some time.
"You were right about everything."
Harry smiled softly.
"Doesn't make me feel better, even though I hoped it would."
Rubbing his forehead, Draco sighed.
"I still have to leave the manor. I'm not married. I already wrote the matchmaker, who said it was a lost cause, and I've sent Simon away. If you want, I could help you pack. Also keep an eye on Scorpius, not that he decides to run away again."
Draco chuckled tired.
"I would appreciate that very much."
To be continued. Hello everybody and welcome back to the wonderful Advent calendar from Jolly Love with the story A Husband for Christmas. Today we're at day 19. Home for the holidays. Early in the morning, the three of them traveled back to Malfoy Manor, where Harry followed Scorpius, who was far too excited to have Harry back in his life. Not that Harry would complain, but he still remembered what the child had told him last night. He wanted Harry to be his dad. And the way Draco was so careful right now, he seemed so hurt. The ministry was coming and taking his house. Of course he was hurt. However, it didn't seem as if it was the full reason. While Draco was working in the living room and walked from parlor to parlor, picking little things that were important to him, he stopped and walked back to Scorpius' room. Having seen his son so broken and hopeless yesterday had destroyed his heart. The way Harry had been there for him, it was so natural. He really wanted it to be natural, Harry being part of his family. However, that was never going to happen, right? It was just a fantasy. In front of Scorp's room, he stopped and saw Harry by a table looking over a book when Scorpius walked up next to him.
"Mother made this for me."
Harry turned to look at him and smiled softly.
"It's beautiful. The letter's right."
Nodding, Scorpius took out one of the letters.
"She said she'd write one for every birthday she's going to miss. This one I got for my last birthday."
"You want me to read it?"
Harry asked and accepted the parchment. Scorpius nodded.
"As my next dad, you're supposed to know what you're falling into,"
he said, as if it was clear that Draco was going to marry him, and Harry smiled weakly. He placed an arm around Draco's son and made him sit down on a chair.
"Listen, Scorpius. You can't choose what makes your father happy, and we can't just get married."
"Well, that's exactly what he told me. He just wants this thing so then I'm okay. I'm only happy if you're my other dad."
Scorpius crossed his arms while Draco frowned at the situation.
"Scorpius, have you heard about the story of a professor in Hogwarts? It's an older story, so you might have already heard about it."
And Scorpius shrugged his shoulder. Harry explained it a little more detailed.
"It's about a girl who got married in the summer after her last year of Hogwarts."
Shaking his head, Scorpius showed that he didn't know it. Draco frowned as well, leaning at the wall, deciding to listen to the story as well. Harry smiled at the child and nodded.
"There once was a professor hearing about this girl getting married next summer. He couldn't believe it, since it was so early, and he asked the girl whether or not her husband made her happy."
"She said yes,"
Scorpius guessed and grinned over the story. Chuckling, Harry shook his head.
The story's not that short. Her husband thought that surely she'd say yes. He knew his wife, and she had always looked happy to be with him, and she never told him they should change something and talk about the relationship problem.
Scorpius smirked.
So she said no?
He assumed, and Harry shrugged his shoulders.
She said no.
He confirmed.
Her husband was really confused, as you could imagine. Well, she continued. She told the professor that her husband to make her happy, since her happiness only depended on her, and not another person. Since everything constantly changes in one's life, the only true way of finding happiness is to find it in yourself. That's stupid.
Scorpius shook his head.
Scorpius, you are responsible for your own happiness.
Harry said softly and smiled.
I don't want to be the source of this, since...
Draco frowned. It looked as if Harry had quite some problem containing his emotions. Scorpius didn't seem to notice, but Draco found Harry trembling slightly. What was going on? As fast as Harry had seemingly lost control, he was back to the old savior again, and he continued quickly.
Since life can end so early. If I die, then the source of your happiness dies, and I really don't want that to happen.
Scorpius shook his head.
I don't like that story. I don't think it's ever happened.
He rolled his eyes while Harry chuckled.
Actually, the girl was my wife, Ginny. She told Professor Flitwick, who was a charms professor, that she didn't need me to be happy as my wife.
He had this sad smile on his lips. This time, Draco was sure that Scorpius had seen it. Frowning, Scorpius looked at the letter which Harry had placed on the desk and then back at Harry.
You needed her for your happiness.
The incredible sad expression almost made Draco's heart break. How long ago had his wife died? It seemed to have happened last week, judging by his expression. Maybe this was why he hadn't taught Draco to get over Astoria's death. He was still mourning as well.
Sometimes. It's getting better, though.
Harry smiled and carefully tucked a loose hair strain behind Scorpius' ear.
What I'm trying to teach you here, Scorpius, is that you don't need me to be happy. If you choose happiness, you can be happy.
But I'm nothing.
Scorpius looked at the floor sadly. How was there so much pain in this house? Draco suppressed a sigh and was just about to walk into the room when Harry placed his hand on Draco's son's shoulder.
Do you know the myth around your name, Scorpius?
Harry asked with a small smile.
I'm named after a star, yes. Everyone in my family is.
Draco's son rolled his eyes and didn't even seem slightly impressed. Harry laughed and shook his head. He performed a quick magic spell and Scorpius' whole room turned into the night sky. It was quite impressive, and Draco had to stop himself from walking into the room and staring at the beauty of it all. Harry then turned to the boy and pointed at his constellation.
Did you know that the Scorpion defeated Orion, the mighty hunter, with a sting? The Greek gods decided to give both of them a final resting place in the stars, but since they hated each other, they decided to place them on opposite sides of the night sky, so you can never see them together. In July, Scorpion will reign over the night sky, and Orion is banned to the underworld. But in January, Orion has fought the Scorpion of the sky to at least be the Lord of the Stars for a few nights.
Scorpius stared at Harry with wide eyes.
I didn't know.
You, Scorpius, can do everything if you choose to. You're powerful, amazing, and, your namesake defeated a god.
Harry smirked.
And did you know that Orion in some stories actually has 3 dads?
Laughing, Scorpius shook his head.
As if.
Harry chuckled.
No, really. In some translations, it says that Orion's the son of Poseidon, Zeus, and either Hermes or Ares. The texts aren't sure.
Scorpius smirked.
How much do you want to bet that my parents talked about naming me Scorpius Orion Malfoy?
Laughing softly, Harry shook his head.
I don't think the stars would have been happy with this decision.
He motioned towards the books.
I assume you want to keep it.
Yes.
Then put it into the trunk, Scorpius. We need to go through all other things here as well, and probably before your father comes in here to check up on you.
Scorpius giggled and rushed away. Harry smirked, getting up, and turned to Draco's son. Suddenly stopped and made eye contact with Draco through the slightly ajar door. Smiling softly, Draco put his finger over his lips, showing him that he wouldn't say a word. And once Harry nodded quickly, he turned and walked into his own room, checking for more stuff. His son was clearly doing fine with Harry around, and Harry seemed to have it all handled. To be continued. Hello everybody and welcome back to the wonderful Drarry Advent Calendar. Today we're at day 20. I saw Mummy kissing Santa Claus.
So, how did you end up as a caregiver?
Harry looked up from his glass of wine and placed it down on the living room table. Draco looked at him so interested that he had almost told him the truth about James, but he couldn't. He hadn't even told her family that she had been pregnant, and the grave was spelled so that should anybody with her family DNA come close, James would disappear. Clearing his throat, Harry smiled weakly.
I've always wanted to have children. In my opinion, if there is anything wrong with the world, you can heal it by showing children how to act thoughtfully.
Draco was looking at Harry as if he could read his mind. Maybe he needed to offer some more things.
When Ginny died, I realized that we never had the possibility of having a child, and I...
He couldn't do it without getting overly emotional. So Harry cleared his throat again.
I decided to look after my friends' children. Soon after, they told everyone that I'm amazing with children, and it ended up turning into a job. So, how many families are you helping then?
Harry smiled.
Around 10. Some have a set date of when they want me to help. Others just ask if I'm available, which I usually am.
Draco nodded and placed his wine glass on the table as well.
How long ago did she die? In March, it'll be 10 years.
Harry stared into the dancing flames of the fireplace.
Sometimes, though, it feels as if it happened yesterday.
Quietly, Draco changed his seat and sat down next to Harry.
I think Christmas is the hardest time of the year,
he said softly. Harry nodded, tearing up. He didn't want to cry, not in front of Draco, and so he forced his emotions back down.
I can't stand how happy the people seem. Nobody seems to feel my pain.
He sighed.
Which is why I'm not accepting clients during the holiday season. I only work for close friends.
Harry could feel Draco's confusion.
But you worked for me.
Nodding weakly, Harry looked at the blonde wizard.
That's different. How so?
Searching in Draco's face for some kind of emotion, Harry quickly realized that he had hidden them all under the pure-blood mask of neutrality. It was as if he wasn't allowing himself to even feel an ounce of emotion. Maybe Harry had to be the one to make the first step.
Because I've tried to look for a way in getting your attention, and nothing ever worked. What do you mean?
Draco still seemed too careful to let out his feelings, even though Harry could see his mask breaking and a small hint of hopefulness shimmer in his eyes.
Oh, I like you. More than just a client. Ever since we've graduated from Hogwarts, I've realized that my constant need to charge at you wasn't because you annoyed me or because I hated you. It was the only way of getting attention I could think of.
Harry held his breath. All or nothing.
Because I think I was falling in love with you.
The silence of the night crept in, even through the closed windows, and Harry found Draco's breathing had shortened. The Slytherin looked at him as if he had just something incredible. And within a second, Draco leaned forward, his forehead resting against Harry's. Harry inhaled, surprised, his heartbeat fastening. He hadn't been so close to Draco ever.
How can you tell you were falling in love when we both married other people?
Draco asked quietly, eyes closed. Harry carefully tucked a blonde strain of hair behind his ear.
Because I know what love feels like. I've loved Jenny dearly, but she wasn't the first one.
Said calmly. At least he tried to. His voice was trembling, and even Draco pulled away slightly, looking at him. He brought up his hand, took up Harry's cheek softly, eyes darting over his face. Draco couldn't say anything. He seemed to be visibly fighting with some thoughts until he finally came closer.
Harry?
He asked softly.
Can I kiss you?
Yes.
Harry breathed and closed a short distance himself, crashing into Draco, kissing him with so much passion that he couldn't believe he hadn't kissed him earlier. Felt Draco's arms around his neck, pulling him closer, clutching his shirt. Harry separated from the Slytherin and panted. He turned his attention to the blonde wizard's cheekbone, kissing every inch until he reached the soft skin behind his ear. All the senses were rushing him with Draco's being. He couldn't get enough of the smooth skin, the faint vanilla smell, and Draco's soft groans in his ear. His fingers traced over Draco's shirt and opened the first button just to get some more skin contact. His kisses trailed down his neck under the shirt when Draco finally managed to pull him away.
Harry,
he breathed, his voice full of lust.
We shouldn't.
Nodding, Harry inhaled Draco's scent as he leaned over him again.
I agree. It's absolutely against the rules.
He murmured and kissed his lips again, deepening the kiss when he found that Draco wasn't resisting in any way. Separating again, Draco panted and grabbed Harry's arm.
You're coming with me. I need you in my bed tonight.
Harry had absolutely nothing against that. To be continued. Hello everybody and welcome back to our wonderful Drarry Advent Calendar with the story A Husband for Christmas by Jollylove. Today we're at day 21. Stay another day. What happened last night? Draco groaned and rubbed his forehead where he felt a pounding headache. This wasn't good. Really, what happened? He felt movement in his bed and was suddenly wide awake. There was someone in his bed? He felt an arm around his chest and turned to see Harry lying next to him, fully clothed. What had happened last night? He had no memory at all. Well, there was a faint one of them. Kissing in the living room and then falling into bed and just being asleep right afterwards? Had he kissed Harry Potter? That was absolutely unprofessional of him. How could he do something like that? He inhaled sharply, a memory taking control of him as he tried to remember what, or if anything even happened between him and the caregiver of his son. How unprofessional of them both. This shouldn't have happened, this. You pig! Draco awoke from his mother screaming and swearing. Considering that she never even attempted to swear, this was highly unlike her. He snuck closer to the door and opened it a tiny bit, just to listen what was being discussed.
You slept with her?
The disgust in his mother's voice was clearer as she spat the last word out.
She's the help. Draco's caregiver, you bastard. Not worth one tiny sickle, and you, pig, you utter lazy sot, let her dominate you in our bedroom?
Draco shivered from the sudden breeze that swept through the manor.
Out!
Narcissa,
His father tried to say something when Draco heard a loud smacking noise.
I said out! Go sleep with the dogs or your fucking turkeys if you like to sleep with dirt.
Draco jumped out of bed, alert. His action of slight panic woke Harry up, who shook his head sleepily and then smiled at him. However, the rising panic made Draco blind to anything else.
You need to go. That shouldn't have happened.
Harry frowned as he got up.
Draco, it's fine, Lord Potter, I need you to leave.
Without any more words, Harry walked out the room and down the hallway. Draco heard his steps echoing through the house and rubbed his forehead. Harry had spent the night with him. They were both closed, but still, it was absolutely against the rules. What had he been thinking? He couldn't just... The memories rushed back. Harry and him talking in the living room, kissing. He remembered the lust in Harry's eyes, his white pupils when they kissed. The whispered words full of love and need. Draco's eyes widened, staring at the unruly bed. He wasn't his parents. He didn't cheat on anyone, and he didn't think that his caregiver was dirt. He had made a huge mistake. Draco ran through the halls trying to stop Harry from getting away. Telling him to leave was a mistake. He wanted Harry to be here again. Why in Marlin's name hadn't he remembered all of this when he was still in his bed? When he reached the entrance hall, it was empty, and the wards showed that Harry had left and apparated a few seconds prior.
Fuck!
Draco swore and turned around. He hurried back to his room and grabbed some clean clothes. He needed to find Harry again, tell him that it was all a misunderstanding on his part. When he walked past Scorpius' bedroom, his son came out and smiled.
"Father, have you seen Harry? He said he'd help me go through my stuffed animals."
He left.
Scorpius frowned.
What? Why?
Draco sighed and shook his head.
Because I was an idiot, and I told him to leave. I tried going after him, but he was already gone.
"We need to find him,"
Scorpius said loudly and closed the door, looking at Draco expectantly.
What do you want me to do, Scorp?
Draco asked, slightly confused. Scorpius shrugged his shoulders.
"I want you to find Harry. He's a perfect match for our family. Much better than Simon could have ever been."
Of course, Scorpius was right. He was a perfect fit. Scorpius loved him to pieces, and Draco had to admit he liked the way it made him feel when he thought of what happened yesterday. The feeling was like 1,000 butterflies all at once. He turned to his son and smiled.
I don't know where he lives, do you?
"Well, no. We went to visit Rose and Hugo, and then we apparated to his house. I know how it looks on the inside, though."
Scorpius shrugged. Draco smiled softly.
I think he lives in the middle of London. Maybe even Mugger-London.
Scorpius shook his head.
"No, we were outside London. It was a small house with a small garden. He's got, like, carrots there. They're not growing right now, but he said I could come by to try them in the summer."
He didn't tell you how to get there?
Draco asked, still hoping his son would remember something a little more useful. Sadly, he didn't. Well, there was something useful. He knew where Weasley was working, and that Harry liked to go there. Maybe he could ask him for help. He nodded and walked to his room.
Get dressed, we're going out.
Rolled over his shoulder as he turned around the corner. When he was in the entrance hall again, he found the wards letting somebody in and opened the door, hoping to see Harry. Instead, Pansy walked towards the manor. Draco sighed, opened the door wide, and stepped back. He was just about to greet her when she glared at him.
"Draco, what happened between you and Harry?"
she asked with a dangerous undertone.
What do you mean?
Draco frowned. How did she find out about something like that? Pansy placed her hands on her hips and raised her eyebrows.
"Usually he comes over to look after Michael and Rosalie while we go and get a tree. Does he can't come due to personal circumstances."
Interesting. Draco frowned.
How well do you two even know each other?
And how long has this been going on that Pansy was actually livid over what had happened between him and Harry?
"We've been close friends for almost 5 years.
That was surprising new information. He never thought that Pansy and Harry would ever get over the differences from school. Before he could say anything in response to that, another voice sounded from the stairs.
"Father didn't mean to hurt him."
Scorpius stood there, eyes wide open and a sad expression on his face. Pansy sighed.
"Well, whatever happened, he did hurt him."
She turned to Draco and raised her eyebrows once again.
"Draco, you need to understand that even though Harry seems to be happy and everything like that, he is like a young flower in the middle of a storm. The smallest thing sometimes throws him off balance."
Draco shook his head. He needed to talk to Harry to make this right.
Pansy, do you know where Harry lives? Please, I just want to talk to him.
"No."
Pansy sighed again. This time it seemed more of a sigh that was giving up.
"Nobody does. Nobody's ever been there. Not even Hermione or Ron. Ever since the Simon guy stole his home in London, he's not allowing anybody in. That's what Ron's told me anyway."
Then how do you contact him?
Even though the situation wasn't funny at all, Pansy smirked.
"Ever heard of owls, Draco?"
She quickly turned somber after that.
"If I were you, I would just wait it out. He'll show his face again someday."
Draco shook his head.
But I need to marry before Christmas.
"Yeah, I don't think that will work out.
If you want, you can stay with me once the Ministry takes Malfoy Manor. Pansy smiled carefully. Draco nodded, giving up.
Thank you, Pansy.
Just don't be stupid and burn all your bridges, Draco. To be continued. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our wonderful Drarry Advent Calendar with the story A Husband for Christmas by Jollylove. Today we are at day 22, Christmas wrapping. Sighing, Draco opened the door to the Ministry officials. We're here to assess the house and its current value. Draco had already sent all of his and his son's personal belongings to Pansy.
Have you found someone to marry, then?
One of the high officials asked. Not that Draco cared to remember his name.
No, sir. It didn't work out.
The Ministry official nodded.
Well, then, I believe there is nothing else left to say. Pack a bag with your necessities and move out by Boxing Day. We'll have some hours here to see that you've actually gone and been keyed out of the Manor wards.
Draco inclined his head.
Yes, sir.
With that, the Ministry officials walked around the house and Draco sat in the kitchen eating ice cream together with Scorpius. After what seemed like an eternity, the highest aura of the group walked into the kitchen and nodded at Draco.
Lord Malfoy, please pack up anything personal.
Handed over a list on a parchment.
These are the things you're allowed to take from the house. If anything else will be missing from that we've written down, there will be a punishment. Mostly the amount of money depends on the value and size of the missing item.
With that, the aura bid goodbye and Draco sighed. He looked at the parchment and was rather relieved he had already packed most things. Not even half of what he had now stored with Pansy was in the list. It was probably just the bare minimum on there.
So, what do we do now?
Scorpius asked and looked at Draco with wide eyes.
I don't know.
Draco sighed and rubbed his forehead.
For now, we can stay with Pansy, but she likes to be alone with her family, so in the long haul, we probably have to go into the Muggle world, find a small apartment there, and get better like that.
Scorpius nodded.
Okay, I'll go look at my plush animals. I don't even want most of them anymore anyway.
Draco smiled and hugged his son.
You know you don't have to pretend, Scorp. I'll make this right again.
Well,
Scorpius chuckled.
You also don't need to pretend to be unfazed by it, and you don't have to make it right.
Frowning, Draco looked at his son.
What do you mean?
Scorpius was long outside, and Draco shook his head, smirking softly. This boy was stronger than he had the right to be. Cleaning up the kitchen, he thought about a way to make money in the Muggle world. His potions business was going great, especially since nobody knew who was sitting behind Potions for the Heart. So at least there was something. However, if he wanted to live in the Muggle world, he needed to find a job there as well. Since Scorpius was going to Hogwarts soon, maybe he could find a night shift somewhere. When he walked through the halls, looking at the parchment list, he suddenly found himself in front of the portrait room. He hated to tell Astoria that he wouldn't be coming back after tomorrow. Sighing, he opened the door and found most portraits empty. It wasn't surprising, seeing that the auras had probably scared most of the darker relatives into the other frames. Luckily, Draco found Astoria sitting in her frame and smiling as soon as she saw him looking at her. "Hello, Draco, dear. How are you holding up?" Draco smiled sadly.
Well, it could be better, but I'll figure it out. Don't worry about Scorpius. I'll take care of him, I promise.
Astoria returned his sad smile. "It's not him I'm worried about. You should look after yourself as well."
I tried.
Draco sighed.
But I ended up with this Simon idiot and...
The portrait was quick to interrupt him. "You weren't looking out for you when you got to meet Simon. You wanted Scorpius to have a somewhat normal childhood in the Manor. That's the only reason why you even thought of getting married to him." Draco nodded silently. Of course she was right. He had always tried to look out for his son. Everything in his life after Astoria's death had been to help Scorpius. It was as if he had decided to ignore his own problems and put a stop to his own life. Then again, Astoria had always been the one to help him over anything. "If you had all the time in the world, Draco, what would you want to do?" Sighing, Draco rubbed his forehead.
I'd probably try to find Harry and tell him what an idiot I've been, and I would.
He wet his lips, unsure if this was what he would do right now, if he had all the time in the world.
I would ask him to marry me.
Azura beamed and nodded. See? That had nothing to do with Scorpius, except that I think he loves him very much as well. So what's stopping you?
I don't know where he lives. I might have found some ex-Auror who knows very well how to hide himself and doesn't want to be found.
Draco sighed and shook his head.
And Christmas is in 2 days. I doubt he wants to be found then.
The door creaked open and Draco turned around to see Scorpius standing there, looking slightly guilty. Probably because he had listened in on what his parents had been talking about. Frowning, Draco beckoned him to come closer, and the boy almost snuck towards them, presenting his mother with a shy smile.
I know where Harry's going to be on Christmas,
he said and looked back up at Draco.
What? How do you know?
Draco widened his eyes. Scorpius blushed slightly and shrugged his shoulders.
The last time we went to Mother's grave, I walked around the cemetery and I found a hidden entrance to another graveside. It led through a small forest to Ginny's grave. I know that's the name of Harry's wife. He talked about her.
Astoria smiled weakly, but Draco frowned.
And what does this have to do with you knowing where Harry's going to be in 2 days?
I've asked Rose if he spends Christmas with them. When I asked Harry what he's doing on Christmas, he said he was going to spend it with his family. But Rose said he's never been with them. But sometimes her dad goes somewhere and comes back with Harry. I think he celebrates Christmas with Ginny.
Scorpius finally ended his explanation.
That is so dark.
Draco looked from Scorpius to Astoria, seemed to agree with that. She gave Scorpius a soft smile. Then I guess you know where you can find him, then. Draco hugged his son, and they bid goodbye to her. Draco wasn't going to give up so quickly. Not anymore. To be continued. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our wonderful Drarry Advent Calendar with the story A Husband for Christmas by Jolly Love. Today we're at day 23. Step into Christmas. Christmas Day was happening early in the Weasley household. Charlie had to go back to his dragons, and it seemed as if one female dragon was finally getting hatchlings. He was not going to miss it, and so, after some discussion, Molly had agreed to hold Christmas 2 days early, but not more. Charlie agreed, though whenever he thought nobody was watching him, he was checking his watch. He wasn't the only one to look forward to some peace and quiet again. Harry, though pretending to be happy and playing with the children, really just wanted to go home and sleep. 3 days ago he had finally opened up to Draco, and it ended up being the biggest mistake of his life. Well, not really. If the Slytherin had exploded right in front of him, then that would have been the mistake of his life. For now it was his lack of stopping Ginny to go and play one more game. While Harry grinned and played with Hugo and his newly given present, Hermione walked over and sat down beside him. She brushed Hugo's hair beside his ear, and while the boy climbed onto her lap, she looked at Harry. "What's going on, Harry? You're looking even worse than usually." Harry huffed and sighed.
Thanks, Hermione. You really know how to raise my spirits.
Hermione shook her head. Harry, tell me, what's going on that keeps you this sad? Is it something with Lord Malfoy? I've seen the way you two look at each other. She'll probably never lose her talent of seeing right through him and run. Well, they had known each other for so many years that she could probably read his mind with even a glance between feeding a dozen children.
Nothing even happened.
Oh, dear. Hermione smiled and watched as Hugo walked off to find his father. If nothing happened, then that wouldn't be your first sentence. What took place a few days ago? Harry sighed and rubbed his forehead.
I may have kissed him.
Hermione widened her eyes. Harry, I thought you had immersed yourself so much into the wizarding culture that you knew better than to do something like that. Nodding, Harry stared at the floor again. He should have known better. Should have also known better not to follow Draco to the bedroom. They had fallen asleep there, right in each other's arms. It had been one of the first nights where he hadn't laid awake for several hours until he had fallen asleep with wet eyes. Did he kiss you back? Hermione asked with a slight interest in her voice. Harry was sure she tried to hide how much she wanted to know about it. However, as much as she could read his mind, he could read her thoughts as well.
He did.
Hermione grinned broadly and shook her head. Then why are you moping around as if all of this had been a dream?
He said it shouldn't have happened and I should leave.
Harry sighed and ran his own hand through his hair. He was sure it looked much more unruly than before. His best friend nodded. And since you know how to follow proper wizarding rules, you left, didn't you? Harry crossed his legs and placed his hand on his upper legs.
I had to. He looked disgusted with himself. I've been around enough people in my life to know when they aren't gay and just want to try something. He's one of them, and I've let myself fall in love with him all over again.
Hermione got up and pulled him with her into a tight hug. I'm sorry, Harry. Maybe he was just surprised. He does have to get married until Christmas Day, right? Maybe he thought of asking you and...
Miney, it's fine. We don't have to give reason to the situation. I might just need another year until I'm good to go.
From the kitchen, Ron emerged with 3 plates of deliciousness floating behind him with ease. There were cookies and a few other mouth-watering desserts on it. He had clearly heard what Harry had said, as he sighed when he placed the plates in front of them.
Maid, you don't need to defend yourself in front of us. I know Ginny's death was hard. I couldn't imagine losing Hermione.
He smiled sadly and shook his head.
As for that other thing, Hugo told me you had a problem with Malfoy.
Harry chuckled and shook his head.
Not really. You might have a problem with me, but it's all done and over.
He accepted a plate and started eating a cookie. Ron frowned slightly.
And Scorpius, the boy really loves you. I don't know. I can't really stay in contact with him when Draco doesn't want me around.
Does that mean they'll lose their home? Hermione asked and sighed. So, Simon wins again. He really knows how to pick them. Harry nodded with a dark expression.
That's why matchmakers are the worst idea in the wizarding community. If people like Simon get into the system, they can stay the favourite and once it's too late, drop out and still win.
Ron shook his head.
So you'll let them become homeless? Pansy wrote that she'd take them in, and should I have a problem with Draco staying with her in the house, she'd be happy to just bring the children somewhere for me to look after them.
Harry explained, remembering the caring words of his friend. She was thinking of him more than she should have, according to the wizarding culture. Then again, they had also talked quite a few times and gotten rather close over the last few years. Did she tell you that she would be talking sense into him? Hermione chuckled. I could see that happening very well. Ron chuckled as well and shook his head.
Also, sometimes you need to give people a second chance.
Harry snorted, showing some kind of honest happy emotion for the first time this evening.
Is my best friend really telling me I should wait and hope to get together with none other than Draco Malfoy? Absolutely not.
Ron grimaced.
Well, I don't remember having seen you happier than when you were around him and his son. So maybe I am.
People do change, Ron, Hermione added, and then looked at Harry. Maybe the two of you were just going too fast. If he stays at Pansy, you'll surely meet him once or twice, when you're looking after her children. Harry nodded. They could talk then. Maybe. Or maybe it really was too late for anything, and Draco had meant what he said. Whatever it was, he was surely going to wait and have to see what happened. Father Christmas. Christmas was just too hard right now. Harry walked through the half-closed diagon alley and quickly turned into a much less busier side alley, heading to Neville's on a little detour, since it seemed everywhere were people singing to bypass us. Not that Harry usually cared, but this year it seemed to be much harder. Having seen Scorpius had made him think of James. His son would have been almost the same age, a little younger maybe, but he had loved to think what kind of fun these two could have gotten themselves into. Now, however, he was left with a gaping hole in his heart, not only his own son, but also Scorpius, who he had started to like much more than he should. Sometimes it did feel as if he had been his father, and now that he was back in reality, he had hated it much more. Not only was Ginny dead, his own son non-existent, and his love life lacking, he had destroyed what seemed like a nice friendship with Lord Malfoy. All that through a kiss. How dumb did he need to be? Sighing, Harry turned into the alley where Neville's shop was hiding and found his friend standing outside, already waiting.
Sorry, Neville. I couldn't go through Diagon Alley.
Harry accepted the beautiful flowers and smiled at them. Neville chuckled and shook his head.
Don't worry, Harry. I completely understand. Free of charge, by the way.
He held his hands up and even blocked Harry from giving him his money against his wishes.
It's Christmas after all. I just want you to promise me you're going on a date next year. You need to get back with the living, Harry. I know.
Harry sighed.
I promise.
Smirking, Neville nodded.
Are you coming over on New Year's Eve? Jamie's really looking forward to showing you his plants. They haven't grown much, but don't tell him.
He winked while Harry laughed.
Of course I'll be over, Neville. And I do want to see Jamie's plants.
With that, he bid goodbye and walked back to the side alley leading to the cemetery. Looking back at the flower shop, Neville was long inside again. It was cold enough that he had probably been freezing. Sighing, Harry turned to the cemetery, walking through the old gate. As he closed the gate behind him, a small white dog ran up to him and happily wagged his tail. Harry smiled and petted him softly. Getting up, he made the little dog walk with him, and they made their way to the opposite side of the cemetery, where an older woman was sitting alone by a headstone.
Hello, Mrs. Kimberly. I found Casper by the entrance.
The woman looked up and smiled at Harry while Casper walked over to her so she could pet him.
Thank you, Harry. I really shouldn't let him walk around here without looking at him.
Harry shook his head.
Don't worry. We all know Casper and he knows us. Nobody thinks he's an annoyance.
It was true. There was always about a handful of people around on Christmas Day. They had all gotten to know each other over the course of the years. Sometimes the amount of people was higher when a newly widowed wizard or witch came to mourn the death of their partner. But the people who stayed here the longest stayed the same. Mrs. Kimberly, who had lost her husband only 3 years ago and who always brought Casper with her, was happily welcomed into their little group. Next to Harry, there was also Abe, a middle-aged businessman who had basically stopped living when his wife died. He didn't spend nearly as much time on the graveyard as Harry did, but he had always liked him very much. Then there was Jessica, whose girlfriend died 7 years ago when both had been 22, and she came here often. Mostly with a new girlfriend every year. Not that Harry thought badly of her because of that. He knew she had commitment issues, much like he had, and it was easier to find someone new than to stay with someone who hated how much he was still mourning for your first girlfriend. And that only left David. He was much older than Harry and Mrs. Kimberly together, and had been coming here even before Harry had. The headstone he always stopping in front of was so old it couldn't even be read anymore. Abe had told Harry once that it was apparently his first love that lay there. For some reason, Harry always pictured himself whenever he saw David sitting in front of the old grave. Would he still come here every Christmas for Ginny? Probably also for James. Harry took a dog cake out of his pocket and knelt down to give Casper the treat.
Merry Christmas, Casper. I hope you like it.
The snow-white dog barked once and ate the whole cake. Mrs. Kimberly chuckled.
I think he really loves you, Harry.
Smiling, Harry petted the dog again, wished Mrs. Kimberly a Merry Christmas, and walked past Abe towards Ginny's grave. Just then the gate opened again, and Casper happily jumped towards a now black-haired Jessica. She nodded at Harry, who returned her nod, and then finally turned to the grave he had wanted to be with from the start.
Hi, Jenny. Look what I got ye.
He made the old flowers disappear and put the new ones on her grave. He then took out a small train toy and placed it on the headstone.
Merry Christmas, James.
With that, he laid a soft, snow-repelling blanket on the floor and rolled into a ball next to his dead family. If he should die anywhere, here would be the perfect place. The sound of footsteps and a warm blanket being dropped on top of him made Harry open his eyes again. It was dark already, and he thought that Ron or George had come to take him back into reality. However, the person currently sitting next to him had wide eyes, blonde hair, and smiled as soon as Harry lifted his head slightly.
Scorpius, what are you doing here?
The boy smiled broadly and fell around Harry's neck.
I found you. I knew you'd be here. You said you always celebrated Christmas with family.
Harry sat up, pulling the blanket around himself and Scorpius.
What does your father think if you'd run away again, Scorpius? You need to go back. Actually.
Another voice sounded, and Harry looked up to find Draco stand at the beginning of the small entrance towards Ginny's grave.
Actually, he already knows.
He smiled weakly, and Harry watched him closely, trying to read his face. He was unsuccessful inside.
Well, why would you try and find me? Shouldn't you celebrate Christmas?
Scorpius shook his head.
Not without you. I want you to be my other father, Harry.
Once again, Harry chuckled sadly and shook his head.
You can't just go up to someone and ask them to be your father.
Before Scorpius could even say something, Draco had walked up to them and frowned.
Who's James Harrison?
Harry froze and followed Draco's gaze to the headstone. He could feel the Slytherin's look change towards him and sighed.
My unborn child.
At Draco's utterly shocked face, Harry rubbed his forehead. He probably needed to explain how he had an unborn child, especially since nobody in the world actually knew about that.
Ginny wanted to stop playing Quidditch that summer and announce a pregnancy to the world at the end of his shitty game. Not even her family knew about James. When she died, they couldn't save him, and I had... You would have had a son.
Draco commented with wide eyes, probably remembering all the comments he had made about Harry's family.
I am so sorry.
Scorpius widened his eyes and looked at the headstone as well.
How old would he have been?
Harry sighed.
He was supposed to be born in December, so he would have been 10 years old now.
Harry?
Scorpius sat up straight and had a really earnest expression on his face.
Do you want to be my dad? I already know you're amazing at it, and I really want you in my life, and I could be your son.
Smiling weakly, Harry ruffled through Scorpius' hair, which made him eagerly save his hairstyle.
Scorpius, I can still be in your life, should your father decide to keep me as a caregiver.
Looking at Draco, he saw the Slytherin with a thoughtful expression, and he shook his head. Harry frowned. Draco just said he didn't want him as his caregiver anymore. What had the world come to?
You know, I've only asked you to be my son's caregiver so I could meet a potential husband. I do need to marry by Christmas, sadly, so that doesn't give me enough time to plan a wedding.
Harry frowned and interrupted Draco's speech, not understanding what was going on.
Draco, if you don't want me in your manor or around Scorpius, just say so and I... No.
Draco shook his head.
Do you want to marry me?
This time, Harry was quickly standing and he looked at Draco in shock, while Scorpius rolled onto the floor and giggled.
What are you saying, Draco? I thought you hated me. I don't hate you.
Draco looked into his eyes in an almost desperate way.
I was being stupid and didn't think you'd even be interested in me. We hated each other in school, and I was married, and the pressure of getting married by Christmas. Draco.
Harry placed his hands on the other man's hand and effectively stopped his confused friend. He smiled softly.
Why are you asking me to marry you? Is it just so you can keep the manor? Or do you actually like me?
Staring at him, Draco brought one hand up to cup his cheek.
I do actually love you, Harry. It's not just a game to get you to marry me, so I'll keep the manor. I don't actually want it anymore.
He looked at Harry and smiled softly.
I want you. I want to marry you. And it doesn't have to be this Christmas. Just someday.
Scorpius squealed and jumped up and down next to them, while Harry smiled at Draco and then chuckled over Scorpius' antics.
I accept.
Draco widened his eyes.
You what? We should get married, Draco.
Harry confirmed and pulled Draco closer to press a soft kiss on his lips. While the Slytherin was still in shock, Scorpius, on the other hand, was happily dancing next to them. To be continued. Hello everybody and welcome back to our wonderful Drarry Advent calendar. Today we are at day 25, and this will be the last day of this wonderful story. We're starting with Dear Santa, Bring Me a Man This Christmas. Without any problems, Draco flew right into the Manor from Harry's little out-of-town home. It was the time where his eviction was about to start. The minister would bring a few Aurors, and they were looking at the home, seeing that he hadn't changed some things, and then take away his home. Sighing, Draco opened the door and let the minister and his Aurors in. In total, there were 8 strangers in his home, and he didn't like it one bit. Just because he didn't manage to get married in 25 days, he was now supposed to go. What a stupid arrangement. Good morning, Lord Malfoy. The minister greeted him and looked around the parlor. It's nice to see someone hasn't tried to get away with as much free stuff as they could. If they had known that they had packed before the ministry and that the Aurors had arrived for the first time, he would have probably taken back his compliment. I have decided to follow ministry law, Draco offered, and looked at the minister, about to say something else, when the ward seemed to detect another person. Frowning, he turned to the entrance, hoping it wasn't Simon, because he really wasn't about to deal with him. When he thought the doorbell was about to ring, the door opened on itself and Harry stood there. Draco exhaled and relaxed slightly. With Harry by his side, things should end well, right? Actually, he was dressed pretty handsome. He was wearing a full dark blue suit and a shell-bright shirt, which he had casually opened to the second button. Even his shoes were shining. He knew why Draco had disappeared from his home and told him to look after Scorpius for a second. Gentlemen, Harry greeted them and threw Draco a wink before he turned to an Auror. Auror Digby, how's the wife and the children? Looking forward to a nice and calm Christmas. The Auror was red, seemingly embarrassment, and quickly stuttered, Yes, Auror Potter, it's nice. Draco couldn't stop himself from noticing how the power dynamics had changed. A few seconds ago, Draco was the lowest person in the room, and now it seemed as if this Auror Digby was standing at the bottom. And all that because Harry decided to pay him a little more attention. This man had all the power in the world. Beautiful. And I heard you, Auror Blythe, had a baby girl yesterday. How is she? Auror Blythe widened his eyes, and it seemed as if sun had just started to shine as he beamed at Harry. She looks just like her mother. It's a Christmas miracle. Harry nodded and smiled. I bet. And with that, he turned to the minister. Kingsley, I haven't seen you for quite a while now. Harry, nice to see you so healthy. What have you been up to? Draco detected a malicious glint in his eyes and tried his hardest not to start laughing now. Harry was surely going to take them for a ride. Well, I'm actually planning my wedding right now. It's a little impromptu, but it will take place in 4 days. You're all very welcome to come and watch. Kingsley's eyes widened in surprise. You're getting married? Who's the lucky lady? No lady, Harry answered with a smirk. I'm getting married to Lord Malfoy here. The silence that was suddenly in this room made it incredibly hard on Draco not to burst out laughing. He had never seen Auror so confused and surprised. Even the minister looked at Harry as if he doubted he had heard him correctly. I'm sorry, what? He asked, and Harry chuckled softly. You're a little impatient here. You really shouldn't take Lord Malfoy's home, since we're only now getting married. At least wait until the next year to check up on him. Harry offered and presented his sweetest smile. Auror Digby narrowed his eyes and shook his head. Lord Malfoy hasn't followed the rules. His home will be taken, even by force. Harry stepped forward and drew his wand. I fucking dare you to take his home, Digby. I'll be defending him until I die. He's clearly under the Imperious curse. He'd never threatened me like that. Digby turned to the minister, who frowned a little. Harry looked at the minister as well, and it seemed as if they were talking through only their eyes. After a solid minute of Harry standing there with his wand drawn, the Aurors dancing nervously, and the minister staring at the former Auror, he finally nodded. When's the wedding, then? The minister asked, and Harry pocketed his wand again. In 4 days, here at Malfoy Manor. You'll get the invitation once we're done with them. I told Draco I'm not just getting married to him without at least a minimum of proper preparations. Harry turned to Digby.
Which is why we're not married yet. Happy?
Dora growled something before walking out. The rest followed quickly, which in the end only left the minister. He chuckled and held out his hand for Harry to shake it.
Quite the entrance, Harry. Are you sure, though?
Harry glanced at Draco and beamed at the official.
Absolutely. Good.
The minister shook Harry's hand.
You need a little happiness in your life again. I'm sure Ginny would say exactly the same.
Chuckling softly, though sadly, Harry nodded. And with that, the minister left as well, and Harry turned to Draco, who shook his head.
Only you would get away with threatening all of us.
Harry laughed and quickly walked closer, pressing a kiss on Draco's lips.
Anything for you.
He smiled and held out his hand.
Shall we head back? I don't think Pansy's interested in looking after Scorpius longer than she needs to.
Draco threw his hands around Harry's neck and pulled him into a hug.
Thank you,
he whispered. Returning the hug, Harry kissed his temple.
Anything for you, Draco. Literally anything.
Draco landed next to Scorpius and Harry in the latter's room. At least now he had enough time to look around. When they had gone here yesterday, he had just put Scorpius to bed and Harry into a tub to warm him up properly, and then they just went to bed. Now, with the afternoon sun shining in, it looked so peaceful, so warm, like a real home. It was very small but tidy. And there was, in fact, a small garden outside, as they were pretty much outside of London. Nevertheless, it was beautiful. Before Draco could look around more, Harry motioned Scorpius to walk closer, and he opened the door to the living room. Scorpius' eyes lit up with pure joy when he saw what was standing inside. It was a Christmas tree. It was still completely green and not decorated.
Oh, I thought you might like to have one of these,
Harry said and grinned at Draco's son.
I know it's a little late, but...
Scorpius cheered and jumped around Harry's neck. The Gryffindor laughed and put his arm around him.
Can we decorate together, please?
Scorpius begged and looked from Draco to Harry. When Draco looked at the other man, he shrugged his shoulders and nodded.
I've got nothing against it.
Scorpius' big and hopeful eyes landed on him, and well, Draco couldn't say no.
Of course. If Harry's okay with it, I don't mind.
He hadn't even finished his sentence when Scorpius happily cheered and ran into the living room, looking at the boxes with Christmas ornaments. Harry smiled a little sadly and leaned against the door frame. Draco placed a hand on the back of his neck and watched him shiver slightly. The Gryffindor turned a little and looked at him softly.
Are you okay?
Draco asked and pulled him into a hug. Harry hummed and threw his hand around Draco's neck.
Just memories.
Draco followed his gaze and saw Scorpius digging through a box of metal ornaments until he found one he liked.
Jenny was in charge of decorating the Christmas tree. She was the one who bought all of the ornaments, so it just feels weird. Have you never put up a Christmas tree since she died?
Draco asked carefully, and he brushed a strain of hair out of his face lovingly. Stepping away from him, Harry looked at him and shook his head.
I never really had a reason to celebrate Christmas. I was just alone until now.
Draco watched him closely.
So you spent all the time by their grave?
Harry nodded.
Usually George, Ron, or Never would come by and take me in for the night, but I don't want them to feel as if it's their responsibility. So sometimes they placed a notice me not charm on me, so they thought I was already gone. That's really sad.
Draco looked at Scorpius. What would he have done if not only Astoria but Scorpius had died as well? Scorpius was the only reason he was still fighting in this world. If this was gone... Before he could say anything else, Scorpius stood in front of Harry.
Can you help me figure this out?
He asked and looked at a string of lights which seemed to be entangled. Harry chuckled and nodded.
Absolutely.
He grabbed the lights and walked into the room, sitting down on an armchair and started to go through all of the boxes again. Draco stayed by the door watching the scene in front of him. He loved it all. Scorpius grabbing some ornaments and asking Harry for advice where to put it. Harry's helpful comments and just in general, the atmosphere around. When the Gryffindor finally freed all the lights, he put Scorpius into a hug and put the lights around him.
Now you look pretty like the Christmas tree.
Harry called out and Scorpius laughed carefree. while still trying to get out of the lights and making a mess of it again. Chuckling, Draco leaned at the doorframe and smiled over. Harry trying to keep him in the string of the lights, and Scorpius trying to fight his way out. In the end, Harry grabbed his son and threw him over his shoulder while he was still covered in lights.
"You won't get free. Never."
Harry called out and turned around himself, which made Scorpius flying.
My head!
Scorpius laughed.
Help, Dad!
Draco laughed and walked into the room.
"Lord Potter, let go of my son,"
he said in a somewhat authoritarian and somewhat joking manner. Harry stopped spinning and looked right into Draco's eyes. He had suddenly so much life inside that Draco almost stopped in awe.
"Never,"
Harry commented and let Scorpius down on the floor, but tickled him. Scorpius laughed, tried to get away from Harry, but since he was still imprisoned in the strings of lights, he just couldn't escape.
Dad!
Scorpius laughed and wriggled under Harry's tickling attack. Draco chuckled and pulled Harry away from his son into a kiss. This should give Scorpius enough time freeing himself. Harry grabbed him tightly and sighed.
"I know what you're doing,"
Harry whispered when they broke the kiss, panting.
"I have no idea what you're talking about."
Draco murmured against his lips, staring at him hungrily. Would have never thought that his life would come to this, about to marry Harry Potter. Before he could think more, Harry pulled him into another kiss and claimed him as his own. Draco threw his arms around his neck, letting go completely. The moment right now was all that counted.
"Gross."
Harry looked past Draco and grinned. Frowning, Draco turned around as well and saw Scorpius sitting on the floor, the stirring of lights around him, and shaking his head.
"What's gross, young man?"
Harry asked, or pressed Draco even closer to his own body. Draco chuckled while Scorpius motioned towards them.
You're gross. Can you not do this somewhere else?
"Can we do that somewhere else, Draco?"
Harry asked with a sparkle in his eyes. Laughing, Draco pecked a kiss on Harry's lips.
"Maybe."
When Harry looked as if Draco had offended him, he laughed.
"Absolutely not."
Scorpius rolled his eyes and placed a string of lights around the tree, though he was still very happy about where he was and what he was doing.
"You're mine now,"
Harry whispered into Draco's ear and kissed him behind his earlobe. Draco smiled and turned back to Harry, who was just looking at him so full of love that he couldn't believe it was true. This was what he had always wanted. This kind of a relationship. I wish it could be Christmas every day. Draco turned to his side and yawned. Before I could say anything, the door to the small bedroom of Harry's home was ripped open and Scorpius rushed in. Draco groaned and pulled the blanket over his head. Next to him, he could feel someone else waking up as well. He smiled softly, remembering Harry's content sigh when they had fallen into bed last night. They had both just stayed in their embrace, cuddling until they had fallen asleep.
Harry, Harry, Harry! Wake up! Wake up! Wake up!
Scorpius jumped onto the bed and pushed Harry into the bed, trying to wake him up. Trying his hardest to keep his composure, Draco felt Harry groan, and then so fast he had almost not seen him, he grabbed Scorpius and pulled him between them.
"Let nobody tell you that sleep is actually healthy."
I want to go sledding. We got new snow. Come on. I want to hit a tree and get ice cream.
Harry laughed and shook his head.
"Runs close today, Scorpius."
Draco watched his son frown.
What he said, he was never close for you.
Groaning, Harry sat up.
"Get dressed. I'll meet you in the living room."
Yes.
Scorpius called and jumped from the bed while Harry fell back and turned to his side. Draco smirked and wrapped him into a hug, which made Harry hum happily.
"You know, Scorp is rather fast in getting dressed. You might need to go now as well,"
Draco whispered and tightened his hug on Harry.
"Too bad. I'll never let you go, though."
Harry chuckled and pressed sweet kisses all over his face.
"I love you, Draco."
After another kiss, he successfully disentangled himself.
"Should we meet at Ron's in an hour?"
Draco groaned.
"It's too early." "We could look at our plan to get married and have Scorpius and Rose talk Hogwarts together."
Harry offered and pressed another kiss on Draco's forehead, while some fast-approaching footsteps could be heard and Scorpius pretty much ran through the house.
Harry!
Scorpius caught through the house and ran down the stairs, which made Harry chuckle, and he leaned over Draco again, pressing a kiss on his lips, while they heard steps running up the stairs. Sighing, Draco nodded and fell back in bed.
Fine, I'll be over in 90 minutes.
Harry chuckled and gave him another kiss.
Thank you, love.
When Draco opened the door to Ron's ice cream shop, Harry and Scorpius were already there. Rose was sitting at the same table, both children bombarding him with questions upon questions about Hogwarts and magic. Harry shook his head right now, as if the children had asked a ridiculous question, though Draco saw Ron laughing in the kitchen, and he walked out with ice cream in his hands.
Harry won't answer that correctly, children. If you really want to know what our childhood was like, you need to ask Hermione, Uncle Neville, or any other. But Harry can't answer that.
He placed ice cream in front of Rose and Scorpius. Both children were throwing interested looks at him, while Harry looked rather insulted.
What makes you think I can't answer how Hogwarts was when we were children?
He shook his head. Ron smirked.
Because you're romanticizing everything. Trust me, children, it was anything but perfect.
Draco closed the door behind him, which got everyone to look at the door. He had his hands up and smirked.
I don't think romanticizing Hogwarts is a bad idea.
Harry laughed loudly and moved away to escape his friend's playful shove. Ron then turned back to Draco and shook his head.
Oh no, not you two. Harry needs to get this picture-perfect view of Hogwarts out of his mind. It wasn't perfect.
He looked at Harry almost accusingly.
Not even slightly.
Shrugging his shoulders, Harry moved to the side and beckoned Draco to sit next to him on the bench.
I really don't mind.
Scorpius shook his head.
Why wasn't it perfect?
He looked at Draco and then Harry, frowning. Harry shook his head and was just about to say something when Ron leaned over the table and whispered loudly,
Your dad and Harry used to hate each other.
Draco chuckled when Scorpius widened his eyes in shock, and he sat down next to Harry, who probably just to show that he didn't hate Draco, pulled him closer and placed his arms around his shoulders, even received a kiss on his temple. Realizing that Scorpius was watching them closely, Draco raised his eyebrow questioningly. His son shook his head and turned to Ron.
I don't believe you. Why would Harry come look after me if they hated each other?
Good question.
Ron said, overly enthusiastic, and jumped out of the way of the stinging eggs. He raised his index finger and frowned at Harry.
If you continue this treatment of my establishment, I'll have you banned from here for life.
Harry laughed.
As if I'm your best friend.
And our best customer, Hermione said, who just walked out of the kitchen. In her hands she had another ice cream, which looked rather nice. It was red and white, and Hermione placed it in front of Harry, who grinned at her.
Thank you, best friend. Hey!
Ron looked so insulted that Draco chuckled and accepted a spoon that Harry was giving him. Harry chuckled and rubbed Draco's arm while he tasted the very sweet and absolutely amazing dessert. He was so surprised that in all his years of walking around London, he had never found this shop.
Well, Ron,
Harry stated and crossed his legs over the other.
If you're not being nice to me, I consider your wife my best friend.
Draco, who still felt as if he needed to keep at least a little bit of peace around here, looked at Scorpius.
So, what did you ask Harry that Ron and Hermione think he can't answer correctly?
His son smirked and licked his lips so the ice cream was gone.
It was what Harry liked most about Hogwarts.
Ron huffed and walked back into the bag while his wife laughed and sat down at the same table. Draco looked back at Harry, grinning just snidely.
And what did you like most about it?
Harry chuckled.
Don't be mad at me, Draco, but I did enjoy flying on Buckbeak.
Draco laughed loudly and shook his head.
Of course you did. Your favourite memory absolutely has to be linked to one of my poorer moments.
That second, Ron walked out with 2 other cups of ice cream and placed one in front of his wife and one in front of Draco. Surprised, Draco looked up and found the owner smiling and nodding as if to tell him that it was okay. Draco was sure that had he not been pretty much planning his wedding with Harry, the 2 Gryffindors wouldn't have been that nice to him. Not on you for realizing that, Hermione said and shook her head. It seemed as if she hadn't seen what her husband had done and how it made Draco feel. I'm actually still mad at you for trying to have him executed." Draco frowned.
"What do you mean? Didn't the Ministry execute him?"
Draco frowned and turned to Harry, who had been watching him closely. He had probably seen the silent looks exchanged between his best friend and him.
"Not really,"
Harry smirked.
"We freed Buckbeak and gave him to Sirius, who used him to escape the Ministry."
Draco snorted and shook his head.
"And here was I, thinking I knew what was going on in Hogwarts."
Harry chuckled and wordlessly shrugged his shoulders. He pulled the ice cream back to his place, since Draco now had his own. Pointing at it, he explained what he had here.
"It's called Christmas Spirit, and my absolute favorite dessert. And the only reason he's coming here."
Ron finished his sentence, grinning. Draco burst out laughing over his comment and Harry's outraged look. Scorpius snorted and shook his head, even though Draco was sure he hadn't understood everything in their discussion. Harry placed his arm around his shoulders again and smiled at him. And Draco grabbed at the dessert and leaned back. How had he never realized that this was the place he had wanted to be? Before they could say anything else, the door was opened again and a few muggle customers walked in. Even though they were technically closed, Ron got up and walked behind the counter to help them out. Hermione turned to Harry and Draco. "So, you need to get married in the next few days, right?" she asked. Nodding, Harry up Draco's arm and smiled at him.
"We do."
He then turned to Hermione.
"Interested in helping us?"
Draco thought he had heard her squeal, and she jumped up and raced into the kitchen. While Draco frowned at Harry and Scorpius shook his head and dove back into the ice cream, Harry grinned at him.
"She's very interested in weddings. Trust me, you want her help. And if you want some special flowers, we can ask Neville for help. He has everything."
Harry pulled him closer.
"No one can have everything."
Draco shook his head. Harry shrugged his shoulders.
"Neville's got literally everything, and if he doesn't, he knows someone who has."
Draco shrugged his shoulders.
"I'm not really good at decorating things. Maybe he can, in fact, help." "I'm sure he can."
Harry grinned. Hermione came back with a huge bag of different ideas. Draco widened his eyes and looked over to Harry, who shook his head with a rather fond expression on his face. It was clear that his relationship to the two owners here was very special. When the Gryffindor turned and looked at him, he still saw the fondest expression and a small smile on his lips. There was such a love-struck look on his face that Draco almost slid off the chair. This was what he wanted. Glittery. The Malfoy Manor looked bright and clean. The white marble stones shone in the sunlight, the blue cloudless sky perfectly reflecting Harry's happiness as he looked over the garden, which had been turned into the wedding grounds. Hermione and Ron were both working hard and putting the last touches in. A few auras had showed up as well, and regretted it within a few seconds when Hermione had quickly put them to work. Harry chuckled as he leaned at the wall and looked outside. Scorpius ran up to the altar and placed a huge bouquet of flowers next to it. The white roses shone blindingly and did elevate the sea of white to another level. He turned and stopped, looking outside again, slightly taken aback. There, right in the middle of the sea of white roses, were 2 black ones and a pink one. Then Neville walked up and placed a few lilies and narcissus next to the white roses. Hermione walked up and greeted him, which made Harry shake his head. Smirking, he turned and left the room once he grabbed his jacket. He walked through the busy hallways. A lot of people had wanted to witness the famous Harry Potter marry, and now that it turned out to be Draco Malfoy, it was most likely going to be the event of the year. Additionally, to a few interested wizards and witches, almost the whole Aura Corporation had decided to show up. Draco's friends, almost all of Slytherin, and of course Harry's friends and family, and basically everyone from Gryffindor, including every professor they both had. And Hermione, Ron, or just any adult had it under control. By the entrance he found Scorpius, who fell around his neck.
"I can't believe you're going to be my dad now."
He laughed and hugged him back before picking up his jacket that had fell to the floor.
"I also cannot believe it, Scorpius."
"Well, are you happy with it?"
He asked and widened his eyes as if he was afraid that Harry was going to tell him that he had made a huge mistake.
"I'm very happy,"
Harry said quickly, not wanting to make him wait for the answer.
Have you seen your dad?
Right here.
Harry chuckled and tucked a loose strain of hair behind Scorpius' ear.
I'm not your dad yet. Where is that idiot hiding?
Scorpius shrugged his shoulders.
If I had to guess, I'd say the portrait room.
Before Harry could ask anything, Hermione called for Scorpius to bring out some of the sandwiches that the house elves had prepared. He jumped up and raced to the kitchen. Harry chuckled and walked through one of the lesser-used sitting areas.
Pansy,
Harry said, and smiled at his friend.
How are you doing?
Pansy got up, hugged him, and beamed at him. In a beautiful dark red dress, her hair seemed to glow.
You look very handsome, Harry.
Smirking, Harry shrugged his shoulders.
I doubt Draco would be okay to marry me if I didn't clean up well. I'm pretty sure he would marry you even if you can afford an actual tux.
Pansy winked at him.
He's rather smitten. He's not the only one.
Not even by far, I know.
Pansy confirmed and grinned.
As a wedding present, I've already offered to take Scorpius for a few weeks when you're going on your honeymoon.
Harry laughed.
I don't think Scorpius would be happy with that. I've already made plans for the three of us, but don't tell Draco.
Pansy chuckled and nodded.
You, Harry Potter, might be the best thing that's happened to his family.
In my opinion, this family is the best thing that's happened to me.
Harry shrugged his shoulders.
It got me back on my feet and living again.
Nodding, Pansy seemed to have the same opinion. She then motioned to the door to the left at the back room.
Draco's in the portrait room. I wanted to wait for him here, but now that you're going to see him, I don't have to be here to help him over whatever he's currently going through.
Harry frowned.
What is he going through?
I don't know. Lately, he's been a close book to me.
I'll take a look.
Harry walked through the door when he heard Pansy calling his name again. As he turned, she smirked at him.
The wedding starts in 20 minutes. You are aware of that, right?
Harry shook his head.
Whatever you think we're doing.
He motioned his light grey suit and snow-white shirt.
I'm already dressed and I can't do that a second time.
Pansy just shrugged her shoulders with a knowing grin and left, while Harry shook his head and he walked to the door to open it. He had actually never been in any of the rooms here since Draco had told him not to use the west wing. Harry knew better than to go against the lord of the house's rule. They went into a small hallway where 5 doors went into other rooms. At the very end was an open door and some light shone through. Harry walked up and looked inside to find the portrait room. In the middle stood a portrait on an aisle, and Draco was in front of it, looking at it lost. He wore a light blue suit, which was almost white, and his tie was undone, as if he couldn't bring himself to do it. Harry knocked on the door and entered. Draco shot up and turned away from him, quickly wiping his eyes. He cleared his throat and looked at him as if he expected Harry to just ignore all the things that he had just seen. Harry chuckled and pulled him into a hug.
No need to hide your emotions, Draco. I know.
Draco sighed against his chest and hid his face. His arms around Harry's neck and his nose nuzzled into the crook of Harry. The tension seemed to fall off of him, and Harry pulled him closer.
I've got you, okay?
Harry said softly, and Draco just nodded. Harry pressed a kiss on his temple and smiled as Draco's eyes found his.
Pansy told me to remind you that we've only got 20 minutes left before I have to look presentable to everyone.
Draco sighed.
How many people have arrived in the past 30 minutes? Oh, at least half of Wizard England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland.
Harry laughed when Draco shot him an annoyed stare. He winked and ran his hand behind Draco's neck along the collar of his shirt. He leaned down and kissed him softly.
Need some assistance, my love?
Draco nodded meekly, and Harry carefully did his tie and settled the collar down before he fixed the tie a last time. During all of this, Draco stood still, his eyes closed. Harry watched him carefully, and once he straightened his jacket, he leaned down and kissed the corner of his lip.
Oh, you've got this.
Nodding, Draco sighed and opened his eyes again.
Can you tell me again why we can't just elope?
Harry laughed and shook his head.
Because I'm a stupid romantic who loves wedding a little too much. As long as you're not looking for a new husband and wedding as soon as we're married, that's all fine by me.
Draco said, a familiar smirk appearing on his lips. Chuckling, Harry shook his head.
I'm almost sure that I won't need to look any further.
Draco raised his eyebrows.
You're almost sure, are you? Almost, yes.
Harry confirmed and laughed when Draco shoved him back a little.
You have no idea how happy you make me, Draco.
Placing his arm around Draco's neck again, Harry stepped closer and pressed himself against Draco.
I've never thought anyone could make me happy again when Astoria was gone.
He looked at Harry and smiled.
You make me very happy, Harry.
Harry jerked when he heard a voice next to him and turned to look at the portrait where a young woman seemed to have just appeared. She smiled and spoke up, talking to Draco. I'm so happy that you found someone again.
Astoria?
Draco looked at the portrait, surprised. Since Harry thought that he might want to talk to his wife now, he stepped back and wanted to leave when Draco held him back. Harry turned to Draco, slightly confused, though his soon-to-be husband turned to the portrait.
This is my Harry, by the way,
he said to the portrait, and Harry felt butterflies in his stomach. My Harry. It sounded so nice. Astoria smiled at Harry, as if she knew exactly what he was thinking. It's so nice to meet you officially, Harry. I've heard quite a lot about you already. Harry chuckled.
You have?
Draco blushed and shook his head.
Not for me.
Astoria laughed and winked at Draco, which made him roll his eyes. He then turned to Harry, holding up one hand.
I swear I haven't been here talking to Astoria for hours upon hours about you. Oh, I believe you.
Harry smirked.
I might have an idea who the culprit was.
Astoria laughed. Scorpius is enthralled. I'm certain he loves you very much. A knock on the door made Harry and Draco look there where Scorpius stood and shook his head.
Are you talking about me behind my back? I thought that wasn't allowed in wizarding culture.
Harry grinned while Scorpius walked closer.
Since you weren't in the room, we technically couldn't have been talking about you behind your back.
Scorpius snorted and shook his head. He then turned to Astoria and grinned at her.
Hi, Mum.
Hello, my darling. How are you feeling? Astoria asked and smiled at him. There had a soft glint in her eyes, which Harry could even see through the portrait.
I'm okay.
Scorpius grinned.
But even more so when we're a real family.
He turned to Draco and Harry and beamed.
Hermione told me to tell you that there are only 5 minutes remaining and to stop what you're doing and get down there.
He frowned.
I'm not sure what she meant by that.
Harry burst out laughing while Draco blushed deeply red. He was hiding his face in Harry's chest again, and Harry grinned at Scorpius, pulling him in a hug as well.
It's fine, Scorp. Why don't you go and tell Aunt Miney that you're not sure we heard you, but you think we finished quickly? No!
Draco called out and held Harry's mouth closed, which did nothing to Harry's laughter. Shaking his head, he then turned to his son.
Just tell her we'll be out in 5 minutes.
Scorpius looked lightly worried, but shrugged his shoulders and ran out again. Draco glared at Harry, who couldn't stop laughing, and so, after a few seconds, he turned to Astoria and motioned towards Harry, who calmed down a bit.
Do you see what I have to deal with every day?
Astoria chuckled. You're good for each other. She looked at Harry and winked at him. You've got my blessing, Harry. Make my family happy again. Harry smirked and nodded.
That will be my honor, Astoria. And now, my darling Draco.
He turned to his handsome men.
We should head out and get married and hope that Scorpius didn't copy what I've said.
Draco sighed.
There's no hope. Stop worrying and let's get married. Fine.
Draco rolled his eyes.
If the newspapers catches wind of Scorp's phrasing, I'll tell everyone what a bad influence you have on children and have you lose all your clients.
Harry chuckled.
You can't. My contract has secrecy clause. You can't talk about me being the caretaker.
Draco chuckled.
I don't remember ever signing a contract.
Huh, Harry said sarcastically.
Almost as if I was planning on having a backup in case I wouldn't be able to have more time to talk to you during Christmas time.
Laughing, Draco grabbed his hand, blew Astoria a kiss, and walked out of the portrait room with Harry in tow.
You can't have thought about everything, Harry.
Harry nodded.
That's true. I didn't think about how much I was going to like you and your little family. I love you too, Harry,
Draco said, smirking. They entered the main hall when Hermione stormed inside. She looked at Draco and Harry and frowned.
Scorpius told us you were having sex.
Draco sighed and looked at Harry accusingly, which made him snort.
He never disappoints. I'll kill you on our honeymoon, Potter. No one will ever find your body. It could be anywhere in this world.
Harry snorted.
You'll make Scorpius very sad.
Draco shook his head, kissed his cheek, and whispered into his ear.
That's the only reason why you're going to make it out alive. I love you too, Draco. Now go and make sure that your son isn't telling everyone we're, quote, finishing quickly. Let's get this day behind us so we can be us again. I hate you so much.
Harry smirked.
I hate you too. Leave, go. I want out of this suit.
You look rather handsome, Draco said and grinned when Harry rolled his eyes.
If you're waiting any longer, I'll walk out of here. You can see where you get with the auras on your own.
Draco winked at him.
I'll see you at the altar.
Harry put a slightly grey jacket on.
I'm still considering it.
While Draco straightened his tie and jacket, they both grinned at each other.
You're the worst person alive, and I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with you.
Leaning in for a quick kiss, Harry chuckled.
Let's go get married, Draco.
The end. So everyone, this is the end of our wonderful Christmas story of this year, A Husband for Christmas by Jollylove. I really hope you all enjoyed it. I enjoyed reading it a lot. I enjoyed reading it to you. And thank you for everyone who spent this December journey with me, but also who spent this year's journey with me. It was full of great stories, and I'm so happy I get to share them with you. Thank you to all the authors. Thank you for everyone who listens, who comments. It really means the world to me. You have no idea. And I'm looking forward to the next stories I will share with you. I hope you'll tag along for the ride, and thank you so much.